Ariana, who once stole my fiancé, Jake, only to dump him and then vanished without paying the compensation she owed my parents for the trouble she caused. Now, she stands before us, making snide remarks. Your husband is quite older, isn't he? What does he do for a living? My husband is a doctor. Compared to him, your husband looks poor. He's quite muscular. Does he, by any chance, work on a construction site? Just as I was about to retort, my husband, Michael, stopped me. I do physical work, yes. Speaking of doctors, working here means he's employed at the Blue Island General Hospital? Yes. He's a surgeon. Really? He's one of my subordinates, though? You mean William from the Blue Island General Hospital, right? I believe his specialty is plastic surgery. Huh? Yes? Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm the chief of surgery at the General Hospital. My name's Michael. Shocked by the encounter with Ariana, I burst into tears as soon as we got into the car to go home. Michael then asked me, "You've been thinking about something, haven't you? Tell me, how do you want to deal with her from now on?"
Deal with her? That's impossible, obviously.
Just thinking about it makes me feel suffocated. There was a time when just thinking about Ariana would make me hyperventilate. Yeah, I understand that you really don't want to be near that woman. That's why I have a plan. A plan? Yes, a way to ensure that a woman never appears before you again. My name is Maria. I'm a 32-year-old housewife. Currently, I live a peaceful and enjoyable life with my husband, Michael, who is 12 years older than me, and our 3-year-old son. Michael is extremely busy with his work, which he takes great pride in. I find fulfillment in supporting him at home. It might be rare these days to dedicate oneself to protecting the home for a husband who works outside. That's what some might say. Even my parents have mentioned it. Now, I have a truly happy family. But getting here wasn't without its hardships. That's because I was betrayed by someone I thought was my best friend. Ariana, who I met in college within the same department, was a friend. No, I thought of her as my best friend for 4 years, doing everything together. Coming to a college in the city, I was a bit intimidated, but Ariana reached out to me. She was bright, flashy, and above all, active, which surprised me in many ways, but I followed her nonetheless. For me, who had been modest and serious until high school, she was someone who opened up a new world. And our relationship continued even after we graduated. At that time, we both found jobs in companies in the city. Whenever we had time, we often went out to eat. Eventually, I met someone too. Jake, a salesperson from a manufacturer that did business with the trading company where I worked. As an office worker, I started getting asked out by him, and eventually, we started dating. Honestly, having hardly dated men before, I was over the moon. Everything went smoothly, and after a year of dating, we got engaged when I was 26. I probably got carried away at that time. You haven't been hanging out much lately, have you? Ariana would sometimes say. Well, that's true. I don't have multiple bodies. Naturally, I started spending more of my weekends with Jake. Are you keeping secrets from me? Not really hiding anything. Ariana, for her part, had never introduced me to anyone she was dating. So, I thought friendships and romantic relationships were different. Since we were planning our wedding, it was natural that my time was increasingly taken up by him. I didn't tell Ariana about it, not because I wanted to surprise her. But I won't deny there was also a feeling of embarrassment. Introducing him to Ariana, who could easily chat up and hang out with any guy, felt daunting. Back then, I was afraid of how Jake would appear in Ariana's eyes. Yet, as the wedding approached, I thought it was finally okay to tell her. Hey, there's someone I want you to meet, I said as I introduced Jake to Ariana.
Oh my! Maria, keeping secrets from your best friend? That's so like you!
Ariana patted my back with a beaming smile. But that turned out to be a mistake. When the wedding reservation and preparations were nearly finalized, Jake suddenly came to my parents' house and said,
I'm sorry. I can't marry you.
When I asked why, he said, Ariana is pregnant. I couldn't comprehend what he was saying at first. After that, it was a mess. Was Ariana really pregnant? At that point, it didn't matter anymore. He called off the engagement when the wedding was just around the corner.
I'm so sorry.
In my stunned silence, my dad, half furious, berated and even hit him while he was apologizing. It could have gotten worse if my mom hadn't stopped him. The wedding was canceled. While I was incapable of doing anything, my outraged parents demanded he pay the full cancellation fee and compensation for what he did to their only daughter. They also demanded compensation from Ariana. He admitted his fault and seemed to pay what he owed, apologizing sincerely. I say seemed because my memory of that time isn't very clear. I was in shock, likely in denial about reality. So, I found out later that Ariana had skipped town without apologizing or paying any compensation. It turns out she wasn't actually pregnant, according to a letter she left behind. The lie and her fleeing devastated me again. What was she thinking? Ariana's parents were furious as well. When this rumor spread among our college friends, I heard another shocking thing. I didn't say anything because you didn't notice, but Ariana used to go after every guy you liked, one after another. This was news to me.
Why would she do that?
I don't know. Even though Ariana was popular on her own, every time someone showed interest in you, she ended up making them date her instead. Maybe she was jealous when guys approached you instead of her?
But we were best friends.
Were you, though? I was shocked. Back then, it seemed more like you were following Ariana around, and everyone thought she saw you that way too. That hit me hard. Not just realizing Ariana's true thoughts, but also that I had been completely oblivious to it, and my lack of judgment when it came to men. Adding to the shock, the stares at work labeled me as the woman who got jilted right before her wedding, and I finally broke down. I quit my job and spent some time recuperating at my parents' house. Then, settled down, I got a new job at 28 and started matchmaking on my parents' advice, not trusting my own judgment anymore. I felt more secure with being introduced by worried relatives. Among them, I met Michael, a man 12 years my senior. He was too busy with work to even think about women, and by the time he realized, he was already this age. At 40, his surroundings got worried and arranged a matchmaking for him. I decided to marry him because he was upfront about possibly neglecting family due to his work, which I saw as honesty. Considering my past failure, we only informed close family and friends about our wedding. The following year, I got pregnant and planned to take a break from work, but then Michael got headhunted by another company in a different city. I felt bad for leaving my relatively new job, but everyone was kind and saw me off. And so, our new life as three began in a new place.
What? Could it be Maria?
One day, by sheer coincidence, Ariana appeared right in front of me. That day, the three of us had gone to the shopping mall. Our target for the day was the home improvement tools. Since moving here, we've been gradually working on our new home's interior ourselves. DIY has always been a hobby of mine. Michael's new job is a higher position than before, and it comes with less irregular hours. So, now he sometimes helps me with shopping for heavy items. Well, right now, he's carrying our son, Sean, on his shoulders, but what are the odds in this mall?
Ariana? Long time no see. Wow, you got married. Yeah, but Ariana, you're in this town?
Yep. Moved here for my husband's job. Wow, so this is your current husband? Ariana looked at us over. Then to Michael, she snidely said, quite older, isn't he? Michael casually responded, yeah, got a bit too caught up in work. Maria's friend, right? Yes, Ariana. And you're all about work, huh? What do you do?
Ariana, isn't that a bit abrupt?
Oh, Maria, are you still mad about it?
It's not that.
My husband's a doctor. Compared to him, your husband looks poor. He's got quite the muscles, though. Does he, by any chance, work in construction? judging by appearances alone.
That way of speaking.
But before I could argue back, Michael stopped me. I do. Speaking of doctors, does he work at Blue Island General Hospital? Yes. He's a surgeon. Really? He's one of my subordinates, though? Huh? You mean William from Blue Island General Hospital, right? Yeah. Oh, right. Sorry for the late introduction. I'm the chief of surgery at the hospital, Michael.
Michael, as in the one who was eagerly headhunted last year?
What a coincidence. Michael smiled gently.
Yes.
Suddenly, Ariana's attitude changed. Thinking back, this had happened before. I just hadn't noticed.
Oh, my apologies. I didn't realize it because of your casual attire.
No worries, casual clothes are just that. I clenched the hem of Michael's work clothes he was wearing at the time. What's wrong, Maria?
Let's head back.
Are you sure? She's an old friend, right?
Yeah.
There's so much I want to talk about.
Let's go.
Okay then. Sorry, maybe some other time.
Sure, love to.
Ariana's cheerful voice irked me. What's wrong? You look pale, and your pulse is racing. While saying this, we went back to the car, and as Michael put Sean in his child seat, he checked my temperature and pulse.
No more, I never want to see Ariana again. I don't want to.
He gently patted my trembling shoulder. If you don't want to see her, that's fine, but can you tell me why later? I just nodded silently. That night, after putting Sean to bed, I told Michael everything that had happened. I see, so that's it. I knew you had been cheated on by your fiancé right before the wedding, but I didn't know she was the woman. You knew? I figured something sad had happened. I nodded silently, several times.
Yes. It's not just that. It's always been.
Tears of frustration won't stop falling from my eyes. It's always like this. I realize something after it happens. I've always hated Ariana. If that's the case, she's really toxic. And it seems like she has an unhealthy obsession with you.
With me?
Yeah. Isn't it obvious? Luring away anyone who gets close to you only to discard them. What does she think of these men to her, huh?
That's true, but...
Even with your former fiancé, it turns out he's not married now, if he was supposed to be with William. That's indeed the case. And about William, or rather... Michael suddenly looked thoughtful. What's wrong? Ariana's husband is. I was just thinking. Tell me, Maria, how do you want to deal with her going forward?
Deal with her? That's impossible, obviously.
Just thinking about it makes me feel suffocated. There was a time when just thinking about Ariana would make me hyperventilate. It's okay, it's okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I understand you really don't want to be near that woman. That's why I have a plan. A plan? Yes, a way to ensure that a woman never appears before you again. And then, Michael smiled gently again. Ah, that's right, this man, though he seems calm, takes action when it's necessary. 2 weeks later. In the evening while preparing dinner and waiting for Michael to come home, Mom, Grandpa and Grandma. Suddenly, Sean pointed out the window. Right after that, the doorbell rang. Indeed. It was my parents. I hurried to welcome them in. Their home is several states away. It takes hours by car. What's going on? Yeah, Michael called us. He said it was urgent, so we're here to watch the house.
House sitting?
Haven't you heard? I quickly sent a message to Michael. Immediately, I received a reply, so your parents have arrived. Come here now. And bring your earphones, along with the URL of a certain restaurant. I don't know what's going on, but it looks like I have to go out now. Unusual for Michael. I was in the middle of cooking dinner. That's okay, we'll finish up. Let's make it our dinner. Wondering what was going on, I started to get ready to leave. By the way, Maria, we saw that girl's parents at the rest area on the way here. My mom mentioned, as if remembering something. That girl? That girl. Ah, just thinking about it irks me, that.
Ariana?
I don't even want to say her name.
But what could it be about?
I hadn't told my parents that Ariana was living in this area. Given how down I was at that time, my mom's worry was tremendous. And her tirade against Ariana's parents was fierce. Honestly, I never thought my mom could get so angry. Because of that past, I thought mentioning Ariana over the phone would complicate things. I'll be going then. I got into the car and headed to the restaurant Michael had specified. It was a cozy, nice-looking restaurant. According to the restaurant's website in the URL, the dinner seemed moderately priced. I wondered if Michael was waiting here for me. As I got out of the car, noticing a few other vehicles parked as the evening gradually darkened. Another message popped up on my phone. Put on your earphones and come inside. Curious, I entered the restaurant where a waiter guided me to a two-person table. A man sat alone at the next table over. A drink in front of him, elbows on the table, hands covering his mouth. Exuding an unapproachable aura with his sunglasses and all-black attire. I'm waiting for someone. I began to tell the waiter to bring water and suggested the menu. He subtly gestured towards a seat across the room. There was Michael, seated opposite a woman, with several dishes that seemed like an early dinner laid out on the table. I nodded to the waiter and ordered a light meal that wouldn't seem out of place on the table. At that moment, my phone vibrated inside my bag. It was a message from Michael. Hurriedly, I attached the earphones to my phone and put them in my ears. Then I heard it. No, William is a good doctor. He specializes in plastic surgery.
But you're even more remarkable, isn't that right?
The woman's voice I heard, her back to me, was Ariana's. Startled, I switched my phone to record mode. Michael was intentionally letting me listen.
Since then, I've asked William a bit about you.
Oh, is that so?
I was amazed. After all, you've handled so many difficult surgeries nationally, haven't you? Thousands over 10 years, I heard?
Well, it's my job.
Amazing.
Ariana's tone had completely changed from our last encounter. Still, you've done quite the research.
Actually, I heard it from William, when I mentioned running into you the other day.
Then, the man in black slightly lifted his hips before sitting back down. Glancing over, I noticed he too was wearing earphones. It must have been a surprise, suddenly reuniting with an old friend.
Yes, but meeting you was the highlight.
Shouldn't an old friend be more important?
No, I felt bad for speaking so dismissively of you before. I wanted to apologize.
Ariana continued in a tone that sounded almost like she was biting her tongue. I hadn't known. She never spoke like this when she was with me during our student days. So, this was how she acted around men. And thus, my former fiancé too.
But are you satisfied with your marriage to Maria?
I am, but why do you ask?
Isn't it boring with Maria?
Why would you say that? Because she was ditched by her fiancé before, you know. Maria is a good wife, more than I deserve. But she's plain, isn't she? What are you trying to say?
Actually, since our conversation the other day, I've fallen for your calm demeanor and presence.
I think I could be much more for you than Maria. The man in black's hands trembled visibly on the table. So, this was his play. Oh, for me? What do you mean by that? Because you're invited to parties and such, right? With a plain wife like Maria, wouldn't you be embarrassed? In such places, you need someone more radiant, like me. So you think you wouldn't embarrass me?
Yes.
So, you're suggesting you'd leave William for me?
No, that sounds terrible when you put it like that.
Then what do you mean? I'm a bit slow on the uptake, you see.
Ah, come on. Do you really make a woman say it? I told you, I fell for you.
William is a promising man. Not an old man like me.
Age doesn't matter. Actually, I'm disappointed in him.
That's when it happened. The man in black started to stand up. I hurriedly approached him. A man dressed all in black, probably this must be William. I silently stared at his face and showed him my earphones and the connected smartphone. William sat down again, as if realizing something. I needed to hear something more definitive. Disappointment. What does that mean? You mean coming home late every day? If that's the case, it's because of work. Unfortunately, patients don't wait. No, it's not about him coming home late or anything like that. Then what is it? It's his salary. Given his age and career, it's normal. Young professionals are like that. But he's a doctor, right? So? I mean, if your partner is a doctor, you'd expect an income over $200,000, right? I believe he's making around $140,000 to $150,000 now. When we got married, it was less, and I was disappointed compared to what I had expected. Moreover, he goes to conferences and stuff, but he never takes me with him. So what if I were in that situation? So? It's not about the money. Haven't I told you several times? It was love at first sight. What do you mean? I want you to date me. At that moment, William finally stood up. I tried to stop him, but it was probably too late. He stood behind Ariana, who was sitting across the table. I hurried after him. Then, Michael smiled faintly.
Ariana, is what you just said true?
Behind an oblivious Ariana, William spoke in a low voice. Ariana literally jumped in surprise when she turned around. What? You? And Maria? What are you two doing? Don't tell me you're cheating? See, when you have something to hide, you end up saying things like that. Michael said calmly to Ariana. I heard your conversation. So you've always thought of me like that, huh? What do you mean, like that? Here you are. I then confronted Ariana with the recording of our conversation.
What's this?
Michael took out 2 smartphones from his bag. One was connected to me, and the other must have been connected to William. Do you even know what it means to become a fully fledged doctor?
What's this all of a sudden?
We spend years in college, then years before becoming regular doctors. I had just become a regular doctor when I met you.
What?
Ariana started counting on her fingers suddenly. So, I was just a newbie.
But, you said you were a doctor at the mixer.
I am a doctor. And at that time, I was dragged there by a high school buddy. I thought it was too early to marry, but you were the one who aggressively pursued me. Plus, I was earning more than my peers in corporate jobs. It was you who assumed I made more. Indeed. Doctors are well paid, but not until they're fully established. And whether they own a practice, where they work, their employment status, and age can all affect their income. And it's true that doctors have fewer chances to marry. It was a rare outing because I'm still a busy newbie, which is why I initially declined.
Yes, that's true.
It might sound like an excuse, but I wanted to work in rural healthcare. I needed to build up my experience in the field to be as versatile as possible. Yet, whenever I mentioned this, you would hysterically scream.
But I don't want to go to the countryside.
Even though I said it pays better, you didn't want to hear it. And it's not just that. You said you'd be a housewife to support me, but you don't do any housework.
What?
I was surprised at that.
But housework isn't just for women nowadays.
That's if both are working. I chimed in. In today's world, if you decide to be a stay-at-home wife, you really need to manage all household duties perfectly, so your husband doesn't have to worry about anything.
Maria, even you're saying that. But are you managing all that, along with your social obligations?
You seem to be misunderstanding something. Michael sighed deeply. You clearly have the wrong image of a doctor's wife. Indeed. That's more like the image of a housewife from the past. The glamorous life you imagine doesn't exist. I'm always watching the clock for his uncertain return time, managing childcare, and ensuring he has the stamina to handle surgeries lasting 10+ hours by planning nutritious meals. Oh, I see. William, have you been thinking I'm inattentive because I frequently seem to overlook things? Maybe you haven't been getting enough sleep at home? Yes. Well, I used to cook and do household chores on my own, but even so, my sleep hours have been significantly reduced because he keeps bothering me whenever he's home, making it hard to find time to study. Study? Of course. It's only natural to constantly acquire new knowledge for our patients.
So, Maria, you're studying too? At this age?
Of course. I'd be in trouble if I couldn't respond to his sudden calls. If it were a marriage between doctors, things like household chores and secretarial tasks would probably be outsourced. But I'm just an ordinary person, so I do what I can to support Michael, for his sake, the hospitals, and the patients. And I want to show our son a model of diligent work.
How arrogant!
Say what you will. I'm not the person I used to be. That's right. Watching Ariana directly trying to charm Michael stirred a different kind of anger in me, not the fear I had felt before. Ariana, unable to counter my arguments, remained silent, possibly out of frustration. Then, William interjected firmly. Ariana, I've decided to leave you. We're getting a divorce.
What? What are you talking about?
Being with you, I can't become the doctor I aim to be. And let me ask again, are you willing to follow me to rural areas?
No, I can't go to such places.
I see. But I want to go. That's why I can no longer be swayed by you. Ariana's face froze.
You can't be serious about leaving me.
Suddenly, Ariana turned to me.
It's all because I met you again, Maria. Why did you have to come here? If only we hadn't met.
So, you're saying you wouldn't have thought about taking my husband if we hadn't met? You haven't changed at all since college.
What? How dare you?
Watching her, I began to feel pity for Ariana rather than fear. Why have you always taken and then discarded men who were interested in me or my boyfriends?
Because I hated you, the plain good girl.
But Ariana, hating me doesn't justify the effort you've put in. Like with Jake, you ended up running away from home. That's right. Ariana's actions were strange. If she hated me, she could have ignored me or bullied me directly. Yet, she took men away from me and discarded them, making it visible to our friends. And she even took my fiancé and demanded alimony. Ariana, could it be that you actually liked me a lot?
What?
She opened her eyes wide in disbelief. Was it my imagination, or did her neck veins bulge visibly when she got angry? It's said that veins bulge when one is angry. Apart from Jake, I hardly noticed. And the men who switched to you because of Ariana's tricks were not worth much anyway. In the end, it worked out in my favor, didn't it?
No, that's not true.
Even if I had married Jake, he might have cheated on me. So, Ariana, were you actually saving me from unhappiness?
What?
Ariana's gaze wandered. Didn't you realize?
That can't be.
I'm sorry, but I'll forget about you from now on.
No, that's a lie.
As she said that, Ariana suddenly collapsed in front of us, clutching her chest.
Doctor!
William looked at Michael with a serious expression.
Call an ambulance, quick! Right away!
Soon after explaining the situation to the ambulance, Michael and William went with it. Indeed, Michael specializes in cardiac surgery. He probably won't be coming home today. As I sighed deeply, the waiter brought our order. Thank you. Sorry for the commotion. No worries, this place was booked exclusively for you by Michael today. Wow. He had arranged even that. Truly, when he decides to do something, he does it right, I thought with a smile. Later at the hospital, there was another commotion. According to Michael's plan, Ariana's parents were supposed to come storming in. Shockingly, Ariana had only reported her marriage but had not introduced William to her parents. Perhaps the timing had prevented travel out of state. But that time had passed. Michael, through William, had contacted Ariana's parents for two reasons. One was the potential for further issues with men. The other was because he had noticed something off about Ariana's health. He had been suspicious of the way the veins on the right side of her neck bulged since their first meeting. As it turned out, Ariana did have a heart condition. She needed some hospital stay, but her life was not in danger due to the timely intervention. Her parents, having rushed over, decided to take Ariana home. Between the divorce, the sudden discovery of her illness, and being called out by me, Ariana was quite shaken.
I don't want to go back home.
Ariana resisted her parents. But you need to pay back the alimony we fronted, her father said angrily, and weakened by her condition, Ariana couldn't respond. The divorce led to mediation, where William's misuse of funds was also brought up, further increasing the amount her parents had to cover. Dragged back home, Ariana was now forced to work within their sight to repay them, a tough situation given her free-spirited nature. Caring for her health while being watched by her parents, and chased by serious work every day, for the free-spirited Ariana, that must be an unbearable ordeal. Look, a message from William. It's the weekend. Michael took a half-day off work, so the three of us went to a park with a wide grassy area for the first time in a while. Despite the chilly days continuing, Sean, dressed warmly, was running around on the grass, laughing. Is he all right? As we sat on a bench with a view of Sean, we took turns looking at an email. Check out this photo. The photo showed William smiling and participating in a local festival. A stark contrast to his previously worried expression. That's great. You won't have to be troubled by the past anymore. That's absolutely true. Half of the fear I had was self-generated. And facing Ariana seemed to have lifted some kind of curse. Daddy! Sean waved at us enthusiastically. All right, let's catch him, said Michael as he started running. And I watched the two of them, guarding this moment. Now and in the future too.
Please, take care of these two for me,
he begged. I couldn't help but feel utterly exasperated with him. The nerve of him to ask me to even take care of his mistress was just outrageous. What? Why don't you ask your parents?
What are you saying? Should I make my elderly parents take on such a burden? You're heartless.
Oh, your mother-in-law would probably be delighted to help, wouldn't she? And what position are you in to be saying such things? Mark, my husband, despite being in a position to ask for help, never lost his arrogant attitude. Watching him, I couldn't help but wonder what I ever saw in him. Excuse me, coming through. Just then, a new bed was brought in next to us. I glanced over, recognized who it was, and couldn't help but scream.
What? Ivy?
The woman in the bed was someone I knew very well. I never imagined you were Mark's mistress, I said glaringly, and she looked away. Now, what am I supposed to do with them?
We're family, so help us out, will you?
While watching the two of them cling to me, begging for help, I found myself deep in thought. My name is Hazel Smith. I'm a 35-year-old housewife raising a lovely 10-year-old son, Sebastian. I have a younger sister, Ivy, who is 6 years younger, and frankly, we've never gotten along. Ivy was irresponsible and ran off with a man as soon as she graduated high school. I'm sorry, Hazel. I know I shouldn't be causing you stress right now. My parents lamented over Ivy's choices and made sure it didn't bring mental unstableness on me. They didn't want to worry me as I was pregnant at the time. However, they had no choice but to inform me after Ivy ran off with all the family's savings. That news did indeed cause me great mental distress. Are you okay, Hazel? You need to prioritize your baby now. Mark had supported me during that time. He suggested I go back to my parents' place for the birth, which turned out to be a great help. It allowed me to support my parents financially with my savings and safely deliver Sebastian. By the way, I've since been repaid by my parents for that money. Thank you, Mark. Your suggestion really helped me feel at ease. Don't mention it. I asked you to quit your job for me, so it's the least I could do. Mark and I used to work at the same company. Mark had been my mentor at work. I admired how diligently he taught me, and his confession led to us dating. When I became pregnant with Sebastian, we decided to marry. He said, "I want my wife to be at home. If you don't mind, would you quit your job?" So, I decided to leave my job for marriage. Despite some regret about leaving work, it allowed me to support my family, which in hindsight, was a good thing. And it was good that Sebastian's birth brightened our home, which had been shadowed by Ivy's actions.
Hey, Mom. Need any help with anything? Could you clean the bathtub? Sure, leave it to me.
Sebastian, now a big boy, is still so sweet and adorable. He plays energetically every day, does his homework when I ask. Sebastian's current obsession with helping around the house often had him asking if there was anything he could do. His excitement and willingness to help always bring a smile to my face.
All done. Thank you. Here's your allowance for helping out. Yay!
He was thrilled, though I wondered if his eagerness to help was partly for the allowance. Regardless, living together as a family like this made me genuinely happy. One day, while I was busy with housework, Mark's mother called. "You haven't visited in a while. Come over this weekend and bring Sebastian. I'll prepare a feast." "I'm sorry, we already have plans for this weekend." "Really? Is it something that can't be rescheduled to another weekend?" "I'll talk it over with Mark," I said, trying to dodge a direct answer. It hadn't even been a month since our last visit. I know she's not a bad person, I thought to myself. My in-laws are nice people, and I've never felt mistreated by them. However, Mark's mother adores her only son and her grandson, Sebastian. This made his parents eager to have us at his parents' house. It wasn't that I disliked going there. As a daughter-in-law, I wasn't overworked or mistreated. They treated me more like a guest, not even letting me help in the kitchen. However, being at the in-laws always required being on my toes. Sebastian takes after me, he's really bright. Good thing he doesn't take after Hazel in that regard. She was always slow at work, probably struggled with her studies too. Moreover, whenever we visited Mark's parents' house, Mark would start drinking from the daytime. He would then talk to his father in a way that belittled me. "Hazel, you need to try a bit harder." His father would hear this and, without listening to my side, would chime in. Their remarks always made me uncomfortable. There was another issue I had. "Grandma wants us to visit this weekend. What do you think, Sebastian?" "If it's Dad's mom, I don't really want to go." The issue was Sebastian's reluctance to visit. At 10 years old, he finds his grandparents' house boring. Their neighborhood is quiet with no parks or natural areas to play in. The backyard could have been a play area, but it's full of my father-in-law's flowers, making it difficult to run around. So, Sebastian brings his homework and PC games, but "You don't need to do homework, Sebastian, you're smart enough. We don't understand these games and no fun, let's talk instead." They'd take away his entertainment. And my protests were met with a dismissive sure, from them, and Mark told me, it's okay once in a while. It's understandable, considering how uninteresting those visits were to him. "I'd rather go out with you and Dad than visit Grandma's." Sebastian would sometimes suggest to Mark, but he would dismiss it, saying, "Visiting my family is our outing." Even when I try to advocate for Sebastian's wishes, Mark insists, catering to every whim isn't good for his upbringing. Mark claims this, but he's hardly been involved in Sebastian's upbringing. When Sebastian was a baby, Mark used my stay at my parents' house as an excuse to visit only occasionally. He left all the diaper changes and baths to me and my parents. He probably held our child only a handful of times. When I wanted to return home, Mark would insist, "It's better for you to stay at your parents' for now." At the time, I thought he was being considerate, but now I see it as his reluctance to participate in parenting. Perhaps his eagerness to take Sebastian to his parents' house stems from not wanting to deal with him himself. "Dad's just not interested in me," Sebastian said, echoing the sentiment about Mark. Hearing this, I couldn't help but feel troubled. This week, I had planned to take Sebastian to my parents' house. Therefore, I decided to talk to Mark when he returned home, hoping to somehow convince him to decline the visits.
My parents' house should be the priority. But we went there almost every weekend last month, and it's only been a couple of weeks since. We haven't been to my parents' house in nearly a year, even though Sebastian spent time there as a baby.
Mark's parents often insist on our visits because they didn't get to see Sebastian much when he was a baby. We couldn't see him much then, so now we want him here, they would say. To be clear, it's not like they never saw him as a baby. They even stayed at my parents' house for about a week. The in-laws had always been merely guests in our lives. Moreover, my parents saw Sebastian only a couple of times a year since we moved back to our place.
Your parents' house is just boring for me.
Enough.
We've had this visit planned for 6 months. If you prefer your parents' house so much, why don't you go alone?
Fine, I will. He replied easily. I wonder if he really cared about our family. I tried to shake off such thoughts, but they lingered. I started working from home to prepare for situations like this. It wasn't much, but it kept me from overthinking. And it helped me save a little.
If I want Mark to be more supportive, I need to try too.
I thought, trying to be objective. But my efforts seemed futile.
Hi Dad, Mom, long time no see.
Long time no see.
Wow, look how much you've grown, Sebastian.
Following our plans, I took Sebastian with me to visit my parents' home. Sebastian was delighted, and so were my parents.
I practiced the game you like, Sebastian. Want to play together? Really? I'd love to. Oh, but I need to do my homework first. How responsible of you. Use the living room, dear. We'll prepare dinner while you finish your homework.
They said, prioritizing Sebastian's needs. The contrast with Mark's parents made me feel uneasy.
What's wrong? You seem troubled.
My mother noticed and said. I took the opportunity to talk to her about everything while Sebastian was with my father.
Indeed, we did monopolize your time with the baby, but that was only for about 2 months after he was born, right? Besides, it's wrong to ignore Sebastian's preferences and opinions. Honestly, I'm worried that continuing this marriage might not be best for Sebastian. I understand. Talk it through with Mark, and remember, you can always come back home. We're here for you.
I was grateful for her understanding. I knew my father would say the same. That was what I was thinking at the time. I'm home. I heard a voice. And as my mother and I exchanged surprised looks, a woman with a little girl entered.
Ivy, is that you? Hey sis, why are you here?
It was Ivy, my sister, whom I hadn't seen in 10 years. The little girl, about Sebastian's age, was hiding behind her.
Ivy? Why are you here, Ivy?
Our parents were visibly shocked by her sudden return. Ivy, while casually placing her bags down, said, I'm tired. Just put these in a room for me, will you? Sebastian, sensing the odd atmosphere, hurried over to me.
Ivy, what have you been doing all this time?
Well, I got married to the guy I eloped. To summarize her story, she got married to the guy she eloped with and had Hannah. And then she had been living as a family of 3 but returned as a single mother after getting divorced.
You're causing trouble again. Don't drag us into your mess.
Dad scolded Ivy as she laughed it off. The children, seeing our father's anger, looked scared.
Dad, calm down. The kids are frightened. Sorry.
Dad said, calming down as he saw the children hiding behind their mothers. Thinking it wasn't good to continue the conversation in front of the children, I asked Sebastian to go to his room for a while.
So, Ivy, what do you plan to do now?
Mom asked once Sebastian was out of the room. I'll stay here. I can't raise Hannah by myself, Ivy declared. Our eyes then turned to little Hannah. She was watching us warily. She resembled her mother in her cute features. We couldn't bear the thought of turning away my anxious niece because of her mother, so we decided to welcome Ivy for the time being.
Thanks. I'll go buy some essentials for living.
Wait a minute. But Ivy had already left, leaving us with a subdued Hannah and an awkward atmosphere.
I'm Sebastian Smith. What's your name? I'm Hannah Johnson. Nice to meet you. I've got some games, let's play.
That's when Sebastian kindly spoke to Hannah, breaking the tension. That helped Hannah to gradually let go of her caution. Following this, Ivy essentially began freeloading at our parents' house. Whenever I called, I'd hear how much she was troubling everyone.
Looks like going back to our parents' house isn't an option anymore,
I thought, feeling like I had lost my refuge. And now, unable to divorce Mark, I sighed. Sebastian looked up at me, concerned.
Why are you sighing?
One day, when I sighed, Mark asked what was wrong. I told him about Ivy, and all he said was, huh? His indifference to my worries was evident. He wasn't interested in listening seriously.
Why don't you just help your sister out?
Mark said to me, obviously not taking the situation seriously, and I couldn't help but feel annoyed. As I was about to retort, the doorbell rang. Ah, there she is.
Ivy?
I exclaimed as I opened the door, only to find my sister and niece standing there. Apparently, Ivy had gotten our address from our parents and decided to drop by.
I've got something urgent to take care of.
Please look after Hannah for me, she said, leaving her daughter with us before I could even respond.
Wait a minute. Is that the infamous sister?
I called out, but she was already gone. And Mark showed up. He watched the whole scene unfold. Yes, that's her.
I'll have a word with her when she comes to pick up Hannah.
Surprised by his words, I looked at Mark. I decided to let him handle it, though I was a bit surprised by his offer. Even though Ivy abruptly left Hannah with us, it meant we could avoid visiting Mark's parents' house. Sebastian kindly engaged with Hannah, and they started playing together, lightening the mood. I watched them play, wondering why Mark was in such a good mood.
Hey sis. Ivy's here to pick up Hannah. I'll handle it. You stay with Sebastian.
As it became dark outside, my sister arrived. Mark, who had taken care of Hannah, returned in an even better mood after dealing with her arrival.
She's quite understanding. Said it was just an emergency this time and she'll be more careful in the future.
Really? I replied, a bit skeptical, but after that day, Ivy stopped coming to our house. She also seemed to have calmed down at our parents' house. Meanwhile, Mark started working late and going on sudden business trips, saying I've been busy these days. Since Mark had explained to his parents that he was too busy to visit, I didn't have to go there anymore, but I still found it suspicious. It was right around that time.
Next weekend, I have to go on a business trip. It's going to be a bit longer this time.
Oh, really? Take care. Mark was scheduled to go on a business trip for about a week. I said, smiling, though I still had my doubts. Hey, can I come over? I called my parents, learning that Ivy was away. I decided to take Sebastian and visit them. Sebastian immediately invited Hannah to play. It seemed that Hannah had warmed up to Sebastian, as she happily accepted his invitation with a smile.
Welcome back. I'm sorry we couldn't be of more help.
It's okay. I never expected Ivy to return like this.
Hey, you too. Look at the TV.
Dad suddenly called us over to the television. There was news of a plane crash. How terrible. Looks like there are a lot of injured. The victims had been rescued, but it seemed most of them were seriously injured. As my mother and I were expressing our concerns, I received a call from an unknown number on my smartphone. Hello? Yes, Mark Smith is my husband. What? How come? What happened? It's Mark. He was on that plane and has been rushed to the hospital. The call was from the hospital. I left Sebastian with my parents and hurried to the hospital. Amidst the plane crash, which resulted in some fatalities, it appeared that Mark had survived but sustained serious injuries.
I'm Mark Smith's wife.
Mrs. Smith, right this way, please. A nurse guided me to his room. There was Mark, lying in the hospital bed. Mark! Hey, Hazel! Surprisingly, Mark seemed quite lively. I asked for details. And I found out that he had become paralyzed from the waist down. The worst part is that it was supposed to be a romantic trip with my lover. Lover? Yeah, didn't you realize? The business trips were a lie. His words left me frozen in shock. Mark, without any sign of remorse, continued. Both she and I are now paralyzed. You're the only one who can take care of us. What are you talking about? My concern for him vanished, replaced by disbelief and fading affection. At the same time, the affection for Mark also disappeared. Please, take care of both of us. I was utterly dismayed by what he said. It was absurd to think that he expected me to take care of his mistress as well. Why don't you ask your parents? What? Make my elderly parents take care of us? You're heartless. Oh, your mother-in-law would probably be happy to do it, right? And what position are you in to say such things? Despite being in a position to ask for help, Mark maintained his arrogant demeanor. It made me wonder why I ever fell for him. Excuse me, coming through. A new bed was wheeled in. I looked over and gasped in shock. What? Ivy? It was someone I knew all too well. She had apparently been brought to the same room because she was with Mark. The woman there, Mark's mistress who had been brought in alongside him, was none other than Ivy, my own sister. You were Mark's lover? I glared at her as she looked away. Mark, unabashed, explained. Ivy and he had exchanged contacts the day she left Hannah with us. And they had been meeting on his supposed overtime and business trips. Hearing this, my anger reached its peak. So, you two betrayed us, got into a plane crash, and now you want me to take care of you? You've got some nerve, I said, contemplating what to do next. Mark then spoke up reluctantly. We're family, so you should help us out, right? Please, big sis, Ivy added, both of them pleading with me. As they clung to me, I decided to speak my mind. I decided it was time to speak my mind. To you, family seems to be just a convenience. It's not like that. So what do you consider a family, Mark? A father who doesn't actively participate in parenting and forces his son to go places he doesn't want to? I countered, and Mark fell silent, finally realizing my anger. My gaze then turned to Ivy. You've always wanted what others had, even going as far as stealing boyfriends, making everyone dislike you. And who's always had to clean up your mess? Me and our parents. Is that your idea of family? Well, at least you two won't be able to cheat anymore. Why don't you just stay together? I suggested, both of them stunned by my anger. The nurses, who had been observing us, whispered among themselves. I'll explain things to both families. But from now on, you need to figure things out yourselves, I said and left the room. I then explained the situation to both families. My parents refused to take Ivy back, calling it her just deserts. It's enough, we can't deal with more, they said. Mark's parents, pitying their son, decided to take him in after some persuasion from his mother. Oh, and I'm filing for divorce, so don't rely on me. The in-laws pleaded with me to reconsider. It wasn't me who countered him, but Sebastian. Grandma and Grandpa are the worst. You don't care about Mom at all. His words turned Mark's mother pale. While she tried to make excuses, neither Sebastian nor I were interested in hearing more. Further investigation revealed that Mark had been unfaithful for a long time, starting around when I quit my job. The beginning of it all was around the time I left my job due to the marriage. He had suggested I take maternity leave because it made his affairs easier. The reason he wanted me to quit was that his affair partner worked at the same company, and quitting would prevent the affair from being discovered. Felt quite taken for granted, haven't I? I mused, taking the divorce papers and investigation results to the hospital. Mark and Ivy, now subdued and shunned. They looked coldly by the nursing staff who were listening to our conversation, were taken aback when I arrived.
File this.
Wait! If you divorce me,
the in-laws will take care of you,
I replied, ignoring their pleas and proceeding with the divorce. I then returned home with Sebastian.
Now, the problem is,
left at our family home was Hannah. She was a victim in all this. So I discussed with my parents. Then my parents hired a detective to find Hannah's father. We eventually located Silas, Hannah's father, and arranged a meeting.
Thank you for contacting me. I've always been concerned about my daughter,
Silas said. It turns out that he and Ivy had divorced due to her infidelity. He had tried to claim custody, but a mediator believed the child should be with her mother. As a result, Silas lost custody.
About Ivy,
I explained Ivy's current situation to Silas. He apologized for any inconvenience caused. And to my surprise, he didn't seem like someone who would elope. So, I asked him about it. Actually, she first approached me using your name, Silas revealed. What? I was shocked. Apparently, Ivy had stolen my insurance card to get close to him. Ivy had deceived Silas and made contact with him under false pretenses. Then, after getting pregnant, she demanded they get married.
Though I was deceived, I did love Ivy. But more importantly, I still love my daughter, Hannah. I want to take custody of her.
I think it's best if you take care of her. And then, I decided to entrust Hannah to Silas's care. When Silas and I returned to my parents' house with Hannah, she greeted him with a big smile and hugged him. We'll be together from now on. Really? I'm so happy. And they left smiling. With Hannah's safety secured, we decided to move. We thought it best not to stay at my parents' house as Mark and Ivy might come looking for us.
A detective told me that they actually visited the house once.
I had hired a detective to keep an eye on their movements. After being discharged, Mark and Ivy, pushed in wheelchairs by Mark's parents, had tried to visit my parents' house. And they found it empty, so they ended up at Mark's parents' house. Ivy was allowed to stay there because she was Mark's lover. But the elderly couple struggled to provide care, leading to constant arguments.
Well, that's to be expected.
Mark, Ivy, and even Mark's parents were all selfish. They always tried to enforce their will. There was a balance only because there were people who would tolerate it. Like me and my parents. We were no longer there, so conflict was inevitable. Well, it's no longer my concern. I had no sympathy for them. However, I needed to ensure everything was finalized legally. So I headed to a lawyer's office. A few days later, Sebastian and I went shopping. I'm so happy to be shopping with you, Mom, he said, his excitement evident due to our recent limited outings. As we enjoyed our time, I was suddenly approached by Ivy. Sis! When my sister called out to me, I was taken aback and froze, surprised. Seeing her struggling to push a wheelchair, I instinctively grabbed Sebastian's hand, ready to flee. Where is Hannah? Isn't Hannah with you? Ivy exclaimed. Given that her first concern was about Hannah, I decided to hear her out. We entered a nearby shop to talk.
At first, I was staying at Mark's place, but
Ivy was in a vulnerable position in that household. Consequently, she felt marginalized and seemed to be bearing the brunt of everyone's frustrations. Amidst this, she started worrying about Hannah. Once she started worrying about her, even though she knew she didn't have the right to see her, Ivy still longed to at least catch a glimpse of her and managed to escape from her in-laws' house. However, without a clear plan, Ivy was aimlessly wandering around the town.
That's when I heard Sebastian's voice.
She continued, explaining how it led her to us. She was anxious about not seeing Hannah and had approached us in her panic.
Hannah is with Silas now.
Ivy froze for a moment. Then she smiled in relief.
If she's with Silas, she'll be fine. Have you thought about what you're going to do now?
There's someone who's willing to help me. This person was a friend she met during her elopement. Her friend worked at a support facility, and arranged for Ivy to stay there for a while. Apparently, she had escaped just before someone was scheduled to pick her up the next day. When I called, I got scolded for acting recklessly, but they said they would still come to pick me up. To Ivy, who said this, I presented a document. This is a list of jobs suitable for wheelchair users. What's this?
I know you're going through a tough time, but I will be seeking alimony. I see you're remorseful, so I'll allow installment payments. Find yourself a job. Okay, I'm sorry.
After her friend arrived, Ivy left with the friend. I thought maybe she could still turn her life around.
Sorry for the delay. Let's go shopping,
I said to Sebastian, and we left the shop. As we were leaving, we ran into Mark. His parents were nearby, possibly searching for Ivy, and stumbled upon us instead.
What do you want? Come on, let's get back together. A family should be together, right?
Stop joking.
I have no intention of going back to you.
Unlike my sister, Mark called out to me out of self-preservation. Disappointed by his self-serving attitude, I glared at him.
I expect a lump sum for the alimony and child support. I'm embarrassed that you're my dad.
Faced with our cold attitude, Mark froze. We turned our backs on him and left.
In comparison, Ivy seems better,
I thought as Sebastian and I focused on our shopping.
Hazel! Sebastian!
Mark called out, but his voice no longer reached me. Later, with the help of a lawyer, I filed for alimony against both of them. Ivy began to pay the alimony. Apparently, she was struggling with a new life and an unfamiliar job. She said she received only minimal help from the friend she had mentioned.
I remember Ivy used to be so sweet and genuine when she was little.
Perhaps being pushed to her limits, she had reverted somewhat to her former self. On the other hand, Mark, who was faced with a lump sum alimony demand, also had a hard time. He eventually had to sell his parents' house and use all of their retirement funds to pay the lump sum alimony I demanded.
Am I too harsh?
After all, he was paralyzed from the waist down.
You don't need to worry about it. Right. You simply claimed your rightful dues.
My parents reassured me, sensing my slight guilt over the situation. Hannah, now living with Silas, seemed to be happy. According to Silas, she was fond of Sebastian, who had been kind to her. This news brought a smile to my face. Sometime later, I received a letter from Silas. It contained excerpts from a letter Ivy had written to him.
I always wanted to be like my big sister. But I realized I could never be her, leading me to self-destructive choices. However, I truly fell in love with you, Silas, and genuinely love Hannah.
The letter ended with, I don't deserve to see Hannah or my sister ever again. It seemed that Ivy would not appear before me again. It was her self-imposed punishment.
Mom, can I go to my friend's house today?
Sure, but make sure you come back before it's late. Even in our new home, Sebastian was making friends and enjoying school. Let's continue to live a peaceful life with our cherished family. With these thoughts in mind, I watched Sebastian energetically run off.
Today, I'm hosting a Christmas party for 20 family members.
Make sure you don't embarrass me. I was completely baffled by Sean's declaration. I was sure the Christmas party was supposed to be at Sean's brother's house. After a while, my father-in-law and mother-in-law arrived. Seeing me clutching my stomach and breathing heavily, they clenched their fists and looked furious. The next moment, my mother-in-law shouted Sean and went back to the living room. In the living room, my father-in-law grabbed Sean by the collar, and the next moment, a loud smack echoed through the room. My name is Kelly Oakwood. I'm a 31-year-old housewife. I married Sean when I was 28. We met at a restaurant we both frequented. We were both regulars there and knew each other by face, nodding in acknowledgement whenever we saw each other. It was a casual acquaintance at first, but one day, when the restaurant's popular dish was down to the last one, Sean kindly offered it to me. Sean is a big guy with a loud voice to match. He's assertive, but at that moment, he bashfully said please, go ahead and gave me the dish. His shy demeanor and large frame seemed so out of balance that I found it adorable. In hindsight, it was a complete oversight on my part. We exchanged numbers and went on several dates. Our first date was at a burger place, and on the next date, he took me to a fashionable bar while I was wearing casual shoes, without consulting me. Sean lacks consideration and has a habit of making decisions on his own without consulting others. Sean, who works for a major electronics manufacturer, seemed successful and boasted about being the first among his peers to advance in his career. His tendency to act unilaterally was a frequent topic of his pride. Perhaps love is blind, as I mistook Sean's behavior for masculinity. Looking back, this was a grave mistake. Sean proposed to me on our third date. I thought it was too soon, but he had already booked a wedding venue. I was more surprised by his initiative than anything else. Eventually, I gave in to Sean's persistence, and we had a whirlwind marriage within a few months. My parents were surprised, but were also overwhelmed by Sean's assertiveness. Sean wanted me to quit my job and become a housewife upon our marriage, but it was too sudden, and I couldn't leave my job. I told Sean I would work until we had children, and he reluctantly agreed. Sean was the type who wanted his wife to take care of the home. The first year of our marriage was blissful, without any major issues. Sean continued to make decisions unilaterally, so things like buying a car or choosing a new home were done without my input. I had always dreamed of seeing the northern lights on our honeymoon, but before I knew it, we were eating pancakes in Hawaii. If I overlooked Sean's self-centered behavior, it was a happy life. However, things started to change dramatically when I became pregnant after a year. It felt less like tumbling down a hill and more like riding a roller coaster. When I found out I was pregnant, I quit my job and stayed at home as Sean and I had agreed. To our surprise, I was expecting twins. Sean seemed deeply moved, saying I'm going to be a father to 2 kids at once. He was so happy that he even bragged about it at work. Sean's phone wallpaper was the ultrasound image of the twins. Sean was showing off the ultrasound image everywhere. I secretly thought it was in poor taste, but I kept quiet. Since it was my first pregnancy with twins, I felt more nervous and anxious than happy. Sean was too caught up in his excitement to pay any attention to my worries. The obstetrician advised me to have a managed hospital stay due to the risks associated with multiple births. Sean agreed to this. It seemed even he was worried about what might happen. Being in the hospital was a relief for me, but I was also worried about something else. Our home. Sean doesn't do any housework. Being the eldest of 3 brothers, he had never done any household chores. It's more accurate to say he couldn't rather than he didn't. Sean comes from a distinguished family, and his house is the main family home. Perhaps that's why he was spoiled growing up. He never had to do housework, and it seems someone always took care of his personal needs. I couldn't leave Sean alone at home. I couldn't imagine coming home to an untidy house after being discharged. So, I asked Sean's parents for help. I asked them if Sean could stay at their house while I was in the hospital, or if my mother-in-law could take care of our house. I get along well with my in-laws. The mother-in-law and daughter-in-law issue doesn't exist for us. Despite coming from a prestigious family, they're very approachable and easy to talk to. Because Sean is incapable of doing housework and has a self-centered nature, my in-laws were very grateful that I married him. Sean ended up staying with his parents until I was discharged from the hospital. I checked into the maternity hospital with peace of mind. Under the care of the doctors and nurses, I safely delivered twins through a cesarean section. They were a healthy boy and girl, crying loudly. When I was discharged, Sean, both sets of parents, Sean's siblings and their families, and my parents all came. It was a gathering of 10 people. The nurses and the doctor were amazed to see so many visitors. They commented on how happy my family seemed. From the outside, we must have looked like a happy family. I was a bit embarrassed by the commotion but secretly happy. That moment was the peak of my happiness. From there, my challenging life began. Sean's attitude changed completely. My life before and after giving birth changed 180 degrees, and for the worse. Issues I thought were problematic before came to the forefront, and any slight hard-working aspect of him disappeared. It all started when Sean returned home. When Sean got home, the first thing he said was, "There's no place like home," and stretched out big. I agreed that there's nothing like your own home. But there I was, with twins in a baby carrier and backpack, hands full. Thinking about life ahead, I just couldn't relax and stretch out like that. Both Sean's parents and mine insisted on giving us space, saying, "You guys need to manage on your own." My parents live about 2 hours away by train, and they had booked a hotel for the day. I tried to convince them to stay with us, saying, "It's a waste, stay at our place," but they quickly headed to the hotel after leaving the hospital. Home is nice, but my mom was always nagging. In the living room, he carelessly threw the baby items we got from the hospital on the floor and flopped onto the sofa. Then he reclined and made a surprising demand. "I want some hot tea." There I was, holding babies both in my arms and on my back. And he's asking for hot tea. How does he expect me to fill the kettle, boil the water, put tea leaves in the teapot, and pour it into a cup? And there he was, complaining about a sore shoulder and rotating it. I decided to ignore his request for the moment. I put the twins down on the baby bed we set up next to the living room. That's when I felt a dull pain in my abdomen. The cesarean section incision hadn't fully healed. My body tensed up in pain, my face contorted, but Sean didn't even glance my way. He was casually playing with his smartphone. I couldn't yell at him and risk waking the peacefully sleeping twins. I had just been discharged from the hospital and hadn't regained my strength yet. After putting the twins to sleep, I reluctantly kept quiet. I decided I had no choice but to prioritize the twins' sleep and my recovery. Sean was not only uninterested in housework but also in childcare. Just a little while ago, we were the envy of nurses for being so happy, but now I felt only anxiety. The next day, my parents came early in the morning. By the afternoon, Sean's parents had also arrived. With both sets of parents and me, we began the arduous task of childcare. Sean, as expected, was of no help at all. In fact, he was more trouble than the babies. While watching Sean, I did my best with my first experience of childcare. My mother-in-law said, "This is the time when children teach you to be a mother." It's hard to believe someone as kind as her is Sean's mother. My parents live farther away than Sean's, so my mom can't come over easily. It looks like I'll be relying more on Sean's family. Sean's dad is still working, so I'll have to depend mostly on my mother-in-law. I'm so glad she's a kind person. Sean's parents were very affectionate towards the twins. Even when I was clumsily changing diapers, they reassured me, "No need to rush, you're doing fine." Amidst this, Sean was the one who felt left out. Since we were all focused on the twins, he seemed to feel excluded. He became more demanding than usual, saying, "I'm thirsty, I want to read the newspaper, I'm a bit hungry." Sean's dad talked to him, since Sean wasn't participating in childcare. It can be hard for fathers to get involved in childcare, but it's rewarding once you try. Both Sean's mom and dad are kind people. I couldn't help but wonder how someone like Sean could come from such wonderful parents. My dad also chimed in, sharing how nervous he was the first time he took me out. However, Sean showed no interest in their valuable advice. All that came from him were half-hearted responses like, "Oh, and is that so?" The stories from Sean's dad and my dad were meant to ease the awkwardness and fears of making mistakes, a kind gesture towards Sean. But it was like talking to the wind, Sean was unaffected. Then, Sean really messed up. Not only was he uninterested in childcare, but his selfish behavior finally made his parents angry. While I was breastfeeding the twins, Sean complained to me, "When's dinner? I'm starving." He even demanded a proper meal, not just something pre-made. I was perplexed about what to do when my father-in-law stepped in. "You're not a child, if you're hungry, make something yourself." His response was perfectly reasonable. Yet, Sean became defensive and said,
"You're a housewife, so it's natural for you to cook."
I rarely use pre-made food when I cook. But for Sean, even one pre-made item meant I was slacking off. Sean's mom joined in the argument.
"Babies can't cook and eat by themselves."
Then his dad added, "If you're so concerned about feeding, why don't you give the baby formula? You could do that." Faced with criticism from everyone, Sean made a surprising remark.
"If I start doing things like breastfeeding, then what's left for the mother to do?"
Both sets of parents were dumbfounded. I could only sigh. Afterwards, Sean's mom lectured him endlessly, and his dad thoroughly taught him how to change diapers and other childcare tasks. Sean looked lifeless, obviously doing it unwillingly and in a bad mood. 2 years passed, and I became pregnant again. Sean hadn't changed at all over these years. I continued to be overwhelmed with childcare and household chores. Without the help of Sean's parents, our life would have probably fallen apart. Sean's mom helped with housework, and his dad tried to teach Sean about childcare. Meanwhile, Sean seemed to resent his parents' involvement, always finding excuses to go out. Sean claimed he was busy with business trips and overtime, but I think he just didn't want to be at home. This pregnancy wasn't twins, but my morning sickness was worse than before. Especially the smell of cooked rice was unbearable, so inevitably, bread became a staple at our table. Sean was unhappy about this too, constantly complaining that he wanted freshly cooked rice. Angered by this, his mom told him, "If you want a meal, make it yourself." Surrounded by his parents, Sean reluctantly cooked the rice. Regardless of how it looked, I tried to eat the meal he prepared for the first time. However, due to my morning sickness, I couldn't finish it. Sean exaggeratedly sighed at the sight of the uneaten food.
"I went through all this trouble, and this is it? If it's too awful to eat, just say so,"
he said before storming out of the house. About an hour later, Sean returned. From that point on, he stopped doing any household chores or childcare. His excuse was, "You're just wasting people's kindness." Unashamed, Sean started going out fishing on weekends as his hobby. On weekdays, he would go out for drinks, citing work commitments, and come home late. There were days I didn't even see his face. Realizing this couldn't go on, I apologized several times about the meal and asked for his help around the house. I requested him to come home a bit earlier on weekdays and to spend at least some weekends at home. I was hoping he would spend even a little time with the twins. But Sean's response was unbelievable. "I've taken care of the twins for 2 years. You should be used to it by now," he said before leaving for fishing. He even said, "It's only one baby this time, not like I can do anything." The 2-year-old twins, thanks to Sean's indifferent attitude, were not at all attached to him. In fact, they seemed to dislike being around him. They would frown and look like they were about to cry whenever Sean walked by. My biggest regret is wondering why I got pregnant with a 3rd child. I must have been fooled by Sean's occasional kind gestures. It's unfortunate, but there's nothing I can do about it now. The baby in my growing belly is innocent. Despite my mixed feelings, my pregnancy progressed smoothly, and I reached full term. Like the last time, I was scheduled for a cesarean section. Having experienced it before, I knew what to prepare for the hospital stay. However, the due date being right after Christmas meant a hectic holiday season. There's a big family gathering at Sean's parents' house for Christmas, but I won't be able to attend this year. The biggest problem with this childbirth is Sean. This time, there's the additional responsibility of taking care of the twins. It seems impossible without Sean's help. I wished Sean could take time off work to match the birth, but I doubt that will happen. As a last-ditch effort, I asked Sean if he could take care of the kids after he got back from work. His response was cold and devoid of any kindness. "I can't make that kind of promise." What he said next was even worse.
"It's embarrassing for a man to take time off work for his wife's childbirth. It's like being a useless husband under his wife's thumb."
I couldn't hold back and was about to retort when Sean demanded dinner. This stopped me in my tracks, and I lost the will to argue. Upset by my request, he continued to complain during dinner.
At 2 years old, they should be able to eat by themselves.
Sure, they might be able to eat, but they can't cook. Sean lacks that kind of imagination. I was so annoyed that I snapped back.
Well, you should be more capable than a 2-year-old. Why don't you show them how it's done?
Unfazed by my sarcasm, Sean said something outrageous.
I'm the breadwinner. You're all living off what I earn. So you should be grateful and make me dinner.
I couldn't understand his logic. His arguments were too far-fetched. Until I went to the hospital, Sean kept saying, I'm the one providing for you. I never intended to quit my job. It was Sean who pushed the idea of me being a stay-at-home wife after we got married. Every time he says, I'm providing for you, I think to myself, what nerve. Frustrated, I reached the week I was scheduled to be admitted to the hospital. Then, Sean made another tactless comment.
You should attend the Christmas party.
I couldn't understand why he would say that. Apparently, it looked bad for the head of the family to attend alone. He had no understanding of the pain and risks of childbirth. Childbirth is a life-risking endeavor. Sean's unreasonable demands continued.
Why do I have to attend alone? Who's going to cook and serve drinks?
It's as if he mistook me for a servant or a maid. The idea of risking my life for Sean's reputation was unbelievable. Sean often comes up with such ideas. We went back and forth with come and it's impossible several times. Finally, my father-in-law talked to Sean, and it was decided that I wouldn't attend. As the new year approached and the day before my hospital admission arrived, Sean was still sulking. Unfortunately, today was the day of the Christmas party. On the day of the party, I was lying down with a tight belly next to the twins. Suddenly, I noticed Sean standing over me. With sleepy eyes, I looked up at him.
Today, I'm hosting a Christmas party for 20 family members. Make sure you don't embarrass me.
What was Sean thinking? I was totally confused by his statement. I was sure the Christmas party was supposed to be at Sean's brother's house. Sean squatted down and shook my shoulder. Prepare a meal for 20 relatives and some desserts that women would enjoy, he said. It seemed Sean had unilaterally decided to host the Christmas party at our house. Everyone in the family, including Sean's parents, had been considerate about our twins and my current pregnancy. I couldn't understand why suddenly 20 people were coming over today. I hadn't noticed, but there were missed calls from my mother-in-law and father-in-law on my phone. I'm due to be hospitalized tomorrow. I could go into labor at any moment. Hosting 20 relatives in such a condition is absolutely impossible. I told Sean, it's impossible to do all this at the last minute. I asked, even if it costs more, can we have a catering service or something? I even humbly suggested. But Sean exploded in anger. I said we're doing it at my house.
Are you trying to embarrass me? As the wife of the eldest son of the main family, you should keep up appearances.
Sean was imposing his selfish will on me. Continuing with outdated notions like a wife should just be quiet and obey her husband. I no longer had the energy to argue back. When I fell silent, Sean seemed to take it as agreement and smiled. Then he said, I'm going to pick up the relatives now, so you get everything ready for hosting, and left immediately. With everything so arranged, I couldn't refuse. It would cause trouble for all the relatives. So, I started to prepare, despite my large belly. I emailed Sean, I can't go shopping now, so I'll have to make do with what's available. Thinking about my hospital stay, I had stocked up on food for Sean. So the fridge was nearly empty, no matter. I managed to prepare the food while pressing on my tight belly. For drinks and alcohol, which I was short on, I decided to order delivery. Just as I finished all the preparations, I got a message from Sean that he was on his way home. In just 2 hours, I had managed to prepare the meals and drinks. I wanted to pat myself on the back. I put the twins to bed in the back room as they were starting to doze off. Soon, I heard voices and the front door opening. I went to the entrance to greet everyone. My mother-in-law and father-in-law asked me if I was okay. Their call earlier must have been out of concern. I just smiled vaguely, unable to say much else. The living and dining rooms were packed with 20 people as the Christmas party began. I was busy serving food and pouring drinks, with no time to sit down. Everyone kept asking me, "Are you okay?" and "Don't overdo it," to which I just smiled and brushed off. Sean, on the other hand, was in a great mood, boasting, "She's tough, that's her strong point." But Sean's parents and brother had frowns on their faces. Due to standing and moving around to serve drinks, the tightness in my belly became unbearable. I excused myself, saying, "I'm going to check on the sleeping kids," and left the room. As I looked at the children's sleeping faces, my eyelids grew heavy, and I lay down. After a while, the tightness turned into pain. Not wanting to worry everyone, I covered my mouth with both hands. But the pain in my abdomen grew stronger and clearer. It had been 3 hours since Sean sprung the news of the Christmas party on me. As I endured the pain, suddenly the door opened. It was Sean's brother. It seemed to have mistaken the room for the bathroom. "Sorry, wrong room," he said before closing the door and hurrying away. Shortly after, Sean's parents came in. Seeing me clutching my stomach and breathing heavily, they clenched their fists and looked furious. The next moment, Sean's mother shouted Sean and went back to the living room. I also staggered to my feet and returned to the living room. There, Sean's father had grabbed Sean by the collar, and the next moment a loud smack echoed through the room. Sean's cheek was red. His father had slapped him. His father's eyes were sharp, and his usually gentle face looked demonic. Even I, who wasn't being scolded, was taken aback. Sean was frozen in shock, his eyes wide open. "What are you doing?" His father yelled so loudly that Sean flinched. All the relatives who had been drinking and chatting stopped and stared at Sean in silence. "Do you understand Kelly's condition?" Sean's mother glared at him with a fierce look. One of the relatives noticed me and offered me a seat on the sofa. Others began to confront Sean. "You said the delivery wasn't due yet, but she's about to give birth. I thought you said she was still in the safe period," were some of the comments I heard. Apparently, Sean had told the relatives that my delivery wasn't due yet to get them to come. He had told his parents that there were no signs of labor yet, and my hospitalization was postponed. Everyone started looking at Sean with contempt. Relatives with children the same age as the twins were there, and some of them were saying, "I can't believe it." Women were heard saying, "If I were in her shoes, I'd be horrified, this is unforgivable, and he's the worst kind of husband." Others were saying, "We didn't know, sorry, and Sean deceived us." The atmosphere was more like a funeral than a Christmas party. Unable to bear the tension, Sean started making pitiful excuses. "She's using the twins and her pregnancy as an excuse to slack off on housework." Everyone focused on Sean, shocked at what he was saying. "That's why I made her cook for 20 people today and serve drinks." What he was saying made no sense to me. And probably even less to everyone else. But Sean continued. "She's been slacking off. This doesn't even make up for it." There were murmurs of disbelief. He made her cook? And for 20 people? Sean began to sweat under the accusing glares. A female relative suggested they break up the party and began cleaning up. The twins' cries could be heard from the back. Sean's parents headed to the twins. Sean's brother has a child about the same age as ours. He looked at Sean with contempt. And muttered softly, "He's the worst." Sean was being called the worst as both a husband and a father, shrinking under the scrutiny. His usual assertive and arrogant demeanor was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, my belly started to hurt. The intervals of pain were getting shorter. It was probably labor. I called out to Sean, who was being scolded and shrinking away. But he didn't respond. Someone asked me, "Should we call the hospital?" and I nodded slightly. Another person brought me a phone, and I called the hospital. They told me to come right away. I informed everyone, "I'm going to the hospital now," but couldn't get up. Sean's brother suggested calling an ambulance, and that's when Sean reacted.
If you call an ambulance, tell them not to use the siren. It's embarrassing if the neighbors find out.
I couldn't believe he was more concerned about appearances than my condition. Everyone was stunned by his words, and Sean continued.
Go by yourself. It's your fault for ruining the mood anyway.
It definitely wasn't my fault, it was all because of Sean's lies. Everyone else must think the same. Amidst the stunned silence, another smack was heard. Sean's mother had returned and slapped his cheek. Sean, his cheek held, was tearful.
I never thought you would be such a rotten person. Giving birth is a life-threatening endeavor.
Behind her, Sean's father was holding the twins, looking furious.
The pain Kelly is experiencing is nothing like this,
he exclaimed, trembling with anger and carefully setting the twins down.
I'm not in the wrong. It's because I'm the one supporting them.
Sean insisted, saying it was my fault for embarrassing him in front of others and that he wasn't to blame. Even in this situation, he was flaunting his elitist attitude. Of course, no one sympathized with him. The sister-in-law raised her hand. I haven't been drinking, I can drive. Everyone cheered. It was decided she would drive our car, and people began to move quickly, helping with my hospital bag and cleaning up. The bag was ready in the bedroom, so I asked Sean's mother to fetch it. Sean's father started helping with the dishes. Sean alone, rubbing his slapped cheek, muttered, If you weren't my parents, I'd sue you. His face turned red. Perhaps embarrassed at his wounded pride. Meanwhile, the twins started crying loudly because of the commotion. The men took turns comforting them while the women hurried to clean up. Sean didn't help at all. Everyone else seemed to have stopped paying attention to him. I felt utterly disgusted with Sean. I honestly thought I no longer needed such a useless man. Sean's brother, who's good at entertaining children, started playing with the twins. He said, I often play with kids at home, so leave it to me, and started playing with the twins. I managed to stand up with support and informed him about the toys in the kids' room and that they didn't have any food allergies. I added that he could use anything in the fridge. Sean kept muttering, I'm not wrong, but I ignored him and headed for the door. Sean's sister-in-law then drove me to the hospital. Upon arrival, a nurse quickly called a doctor, who took me to the delivery room. It seemed labor could happen at any moment. As expected, as soon as I was on the delivery bed, I gave birth. It was a relief that the delivery was smooth. The only one who suffered was my sister-in-law. She couldn't go home and had to stay until the next morning. The day after I safely gave birth, Sean's parents came to the hospital with the twins. After the incident, Sean sulked in a corner of the room, drinking canned beer. Sean's father took him to the bedroom. Not wanting the children to see their father being scolded, a thoughtful gesture from him. I heard Sean's father scolded him all night. And Sean looked deflated. Sean's father told me this with a wry smile. After a while, Sean came to my hospital room. In front of his parents, he was meek and apologized in a low voice, saying, Sorry about yesterday. The fact that both his parents had hit him seemed to have a significant impact on him. Sensing the situation, Sean's parents left us alone. As soon as they were gone, Sean's attitude changed. I was slapped by Dad and Mom because of you. He continued to complain about how I was inconsiderate and not thoughtful enough. At that moment, I was utterly fed up with Sean. I firmly decided to divorce him. Despite feeling anxious about becoming a single mother of 3, I knew I couldn't stay with Sean. I pressed the nurse call button without hesitation. A nurse came right away. Sean's parents followed her, returning to the room. He's a stranger to me. Please ask him to leave. The nurse looked confused, but Sean's mother understood. And promptly escorted Sean out of the room. Sean's parents left the hospital with him. Before they left, they told me my parents would come in the afternoon. Indeed, my parents arrived later that day. I told them about the previous day's events and my decision to divorce Sean. My parents initially thought Sean had cheated when they heard about the divorce from Sean's mother. They had been under the impression that divorce meant infidelity. They never imagined a heavily pregnant wife being commanded by her husband to prepare for a Christmas party and serve drinks. I explained everything to my parents, including being forced to cook for 20 people and serve drinks, how hard it had been, and how much I had endured. We all cried as I spoke. By the end of our conversation, we were smiling, relieved after crying. "Rest at home after the birth," my mother kindly said. I was discharged safely and am now recuperating at my parents' house. About the divorce, Sean's parents agreed there was no reason to oppose it. The only one strongly against it was Sean. He kept contacting me, but I blocked his calls and told his parents not to let him contact me. It seems Sean has lost his mental stability without me, who he treated like a servant. Living alone, Sean couldn't manage to clean up his house, and it became cluttered with trash. At work, he vented his frustration by repeatedly committing acts of power harassment, nearly facing disciplinary action from human resources. Despite this, Sean's attitude didn't change, and he even harassed his work clients. Eventually, Sean was fired. At that time, it seemed no one sympathized with him. Now, he's working in the fields at his parents' home, apparently being reprimanded and taught a lesson. Sean often cries saying, "The house where I lived with Kelly was my oasis." I heard all of that from his mother, with whom I'm still in contact. But for me, that house was nothing but a desert. With the help of Sean's parents, our divorce was successfully finalized. The house we lived in was sold, and I receive all the money from the sale as alimony. I've decided to live at my parents' home. I still keep in touch with Sean's parents and brother. Sometimes, they come to play with the twins who say they missed the sister and brother who played with us that time. For Sean's parents, the twins are still their grandchildren. They visit when they can, happily playing with all 3 grandchildren. The kids are fond of their grandpa and grandma. I feel that if the Christmas party hadn't happened, I might not have been able to go to the hospital. Sean, on his own, couldn't have managed to take me to the hospital and look after the twins. Plus, that incident helped me make up my mind about Sean. In a way, I'm thankful to Sean for holding that party at our house. It really is a case of blessing in disguise. You never know how things will turn out. I'll never forget the gratitude I feel towards those who helped me then. With my 3 children, I want to become even happier and help others just as I was helped. Wow, oh, it's new and beautiful. Looks like a nice, usable house. This is our cherished new home, meticulously planned and built by my husband and me, a newly married couple. It was our parents-in-law, both of them, who carelessly dropped their muddy, old suitcase right in the middle of our meticulously cleaned living room. To our surprise, they were moving from today. They announced they lived with us. I was shocked and confronted my husband. Why is this happening without any discussion? Don't worry, my mom's here to help with the housework, right? We'll get used to it soon, and supporting each other as a family is what matters. There's no problem. My husband, heavily influenced by his parents, didn't seem to consider my refusal at all. He grew up in a grand, old American-style house, and frankly, he has always seen the role of a wife as nothing more than a convenient housekeeper. A viewpoint shared by his parents. I had endured weekly dinners at their house, where my father-in-law would openly call me a disobedient woman. Furthermore, we were short on rooms, so my husband ordered me to vacate mine. "You can sleep in the yard, it's lucky for you since you won't have to deal with my parents," he said with a smirk. Holding back my tears, I rushed into my room. And then, when I returned, dragging a heavy suitcase just as burdensome as my in-laws, my husband and his parents were shocked. I announced loudly, "I'm going back to my parents' house, enjoy yourselves." I am Mirabelle. Currently, I work in the product development department of a health food company. I'm 32, and my husband, Tom, also 32, works in the sales department of the same company. Tom is a very thoughtful person, a hidden gem in any team he joins, always playing a supportive role. He's a top performer in our department, a husband I'm proud of. Our first meeting was at a departmental mixer. Dressed up, I caught his attention with the antique ring on my little finger. He was intrigued by my hobby of collecting antique jewelry. He admitted to thinking rings were just flashy, gem-studded pieces from his family's collection, so I introduced him to more vintage designs. Soon, we started going out for meals after work and on weekends, quickly progressing to a relationship, followed by a proposal in less than 6 months, celebrated by many colleagues and superiors. We had a dream even before marriage: building our own home. Our goal was to contribute equally, take out a loan, and create a small but detailed home of our own.
I'd like a spacious living room, maybe a yard, thinking of kids and pets in the future. We might not have a big budget, but I'll work harder than ever, save more, do whatever it takes.
We had many requests about the house. We have a certain location in mind, but we need to decide on the land based on transportation, shopping, imagine when we have children, the design of the exterior, and other points that each of us has that we can't miss. We had meticulously planned and worked tirelessly with a design firm to create our dream home. Though the plot was introduced by a real estate agent near my parents' house, they are quite kind and won't trouble you. No worries, they were nice during our visit. But your mom's cooking skills are a bit intimidating. His family used to own a lot of land in the area. Now mostly sold off, except for their residence. Luckily, due to these connections, we got priority in securing our plot. Since we searched through connections, the location ended up being a plot close to my in-laws' house. I didn't have many opportunities to meet my in-laws outside of formal greetings. Because of this, I felt the need to be cautious and was quite nervous about how to interact with them. However, my in-laws always seemed cheerful and kind, and they appeared genuinely happy whenever I visited. My father-in-law was the breadwinner with a strong sense of responsibility, and my mother-in-law was a dedicated homemaker. When they heard about our plans for a new home, they were excited and supportive, and I thought they were wonderful parents-in-law. As our house plans progressed to the construction phase, my husband and I decided to visit his parents' house. Their house was nearby, though not next door. We wanted to make a good impression early on. Their house was a large, traditional American-style home. And I was always overwhelmed by its size. They greeted us with smiles as usual.
Building your own house is a big step, but I'm proud of my son. Our house is old, so a new, clean home is something to admire. Building a house is exciting, isn't it? Mirabelle, we're looking forward to it too.
That's how my in-laws both gave me their support. Our current residence was a bit far from there. My husband, Tom, suggested, "It's gonna be a while till the house is finished, but how about we spend more time together in the meantime?" I readily agreed, of course, let's do that. Tom had a good relationship with his parents, and they were always up to date with his business trips and weekend plans. So, we started getting invited over on weekends that coincided with our days off. The visits were for simple reasons like going to the mall or having meals at their home. However, I felt there was a limit. For example, I would get calls from my mother-in-law on a Friday night saying, "Mirabelle, thank you for the last time. Next time, could you drive us to look for a purse as a gift for a friend? It would be a big help. Also, we're inviting you over for lunch on Sunday. We're getting some nice fish, so bring Tom along. Could you bring a dish? I'm good at fried and stewed dishes and salads, so please bring something else. And about your clothes." She not only talked at length, but also filled up our weekend schedule and made specific requests. I wondered if dealing with in-laws was always this demanding and secretly asked my friends for advice, but all I got were comments blaming the oddity of my in-laws. I began to dread visiting them and felt increasingly trapped. As my work in the product development department got busier and the frequent visits to my in-laws' house fueled my mistrust. One day, I mustered the courage to decline over the phone. "I feel bad visiting so often, and I also want to have some quiet time on the weekends. I'm embarrassed to say, but with work, I can hardly keep up with chores at home." I tried to deflect the conversation, but my mother-in-law was unyielding. Insisting, "Don't be shy, we're family now, and I couldn't escape that weekend's plans. Reluctantly, I went to my in-laws' house with a heavy heart. To make matters worse, my husband knew I had tried to decline the invitation. Throughout the car ride, he scolded me. Mom was sad, Dad might say something, blaming me. At their house, with dishes spread across the dining table, the topic came up again. I felt like I was sitting on pins and needles. Then my father-in-law pointed at my mother-in-law and said, "Why don't you go help out? It's not too much for her. That would be too much for Mom." "That's not a problem. She can just finish the housework during the week and then come clean up your apartment. She's a homemaker, after all, she's got free time." I was surprised by his suggestion and even more so by his tone. His attitude towards my mother-in-law, a homemaker, was filled with misconceptions and harsh assumptions. I was at a loss for words, feeling like he was a boss issuing orders rather than a family member. What was terrifying was that my mother-in-law just smiled and nodded, as if my husband's instructions were the most natural thing in the world. I felt a chill down my spine. Thankfully, I managed to fend off the suggestion that she take over our household chores. In stark contrast to her compliance, my repeated refusals made my father-in-law mutter, "What a disobedient daughter-in-law." I could feel my irritation rising, and my heart raced. My father-in-law quickly became sullen, and my mother-in-law scrambled to cater to his needs. The tension in the air was suffocating, and I quietly resolved to stop visiting my in-laws. The following week, when my mother-in-law called, I tried to excuse myself, saying, "I have other plans and can't come." If the new house was completed and they had to live near their in-laws, they would have had to see each other every day, not just every week off. The horrible thought filled me with dread. Why not? Haven't you finished your chores? Maybe it would have been better if I had helped out, like my husband suggested. She persisted, but I had my response ready. "I have plans with a friend who attended our wedding. We're going out as a thank you. So, I can't come today, but I'll visit when our schedules align. I'll make sure to convey my thanks to my friend." I rattled off my excuse and managed to end the call. The promise was a lie, but feeling unsafe at home, I quickly left. From that day on, I found excuses to avoid visiting my in-laws. Despite this strained relationship, our new home was completed. My husband, Tom, and I were thrilled with our sparkling new house and took great care in cleaning every corner. However, not even half a month after moving in, my mother-in-law summoned me unexpectedly. Her tone was serious. "It's something I must tell you. I know you don't plan to come to our house on your days off, but this is something I just have to tell you." "Okay, I'll come right over," I replied, though it pained me to do so. Rushing over, I found my mother-in-law eager to explain the household chores at her home. The basics are daily sweeping of the entrance and garden. Normally it's just dry wiping, but on weekends we do a thorough mopping. Plus, there's shopping and managing the household budget. "Oh, you can change things to suit you." She smiled kindly, but I was baffled by her explanation. It was as if she was discussing how we would share chores if I moved in with them. "Wait a minute! Why are you telling me all this?" I wondered what she expected me to do with this information about cleaning supplies and kitchen use. When I asked, her face clouded over. "You married into our family, Mirabelle, so you need to follow our ways. Don't you know that yet? Don't you want to contribute to your husband's family?" Then she asked, "How long are you planning to keep working?" I was speechless, having had no intention of quitting my job. It seemed she expected me to eventually leave my job, become a homemaker, and help out with their chores. Stunned by this unexpected turn, I firmly stated, "If that's the case, I'm leaving. I understand my duties as a wife and will help out where I can, but my priority is my time with my husband. I have work in our own household chores, so I can't help out here." With that, I left my in-laws' house. I immediately protested to Tom, but he took his parents' side and wouldn't listen. "I didn't marry into this family to do their housework," I said, but he just looked annoyed. "Are you always this selfish? My parents can't be wrong. Can't you get along with them?" I was speechless and could only stare back at him. I was shocked not only by the vast difference in thinking between me and my in-laws but also by my husband Tom's refusal to listen to my views. He's usually not like this, but when it comes to his parents, especially his father, he seems to change completely, adhering to whatever they say as absolute. The decision to build our own home was initially suggested by his father, who wanted to maintain good relations with a real estate agent through purchasing land. The word divorce involuntarily flashed through my mind. But with Tom frequently away on business trips, I was often left alone at home. Plus, there was the fact that we had just built our dream home. I decided to observe the situation a little longer, as long as I could keep a distance from his parents. However, I made it clear to Tom that I didn't want any involvement with his parents.
The relationship with your family is quite different from a normal mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship. Honestly, I don't want any more involvement. I won't be visiting your parents' house for chores, and I have no intention of living with them. Please remember that.
I expressed this earnestly. I expected him to get angry, but surprisingly, Tom backed down, saying, "Okay, I got it. I'll handle things with my parents from now on." A month later, on a weekend, I was preparing lunch at home. Then Tom, who had been out since morning, returned with multiple voices accompanying him. I was surprised to see my in-laws enter the living room with large bags.
"Oh, it's so nice and clean because it's new. It looks like a great, user-friendly house,"
exclaimed my father-in-law with a loud laugh. Tom seemed proud as he showed them around the living room, carrying heavy luggage like carry-on cases and backpacks. When I confronted him, he began to say something unbelievable. He announced that his parents were moving in with us from today.
"What? Why? Without any discussion?"
I've been thinking about this for a while. Since Mirabelle doesn't want to deal with my parents, I've been mediating. Don't worry, my mom's here for the housework, right? We'll get used to it, and it's good to support each other, no problem," he said, as if he never doubted I would welcome living with his parents. I felt a sense of despair. I was foreseeing a difficult life living with in-laws whose perspectives were so different from mine. I was determined to avoid living with them, but apparently, our house and land had already been sold without my knowledge. The preparations for their move were made entirely behind my back. They only brought their immediate belongings, and their larger furniture was stored in a storage unit. I had just told Tom that I wanted to minimize interaction with his parents, and now I felt utterly betrayed.
"Why did you decide this without telling me? Why proceed unilaterally without any discussion? Don't you consider my feelings? This is about our future life as a family. We should have discussed it together."
But Tom was indifferent. He looked at me as if I was a nuisance. But if my parents want to live with us, what can I do? Think of it as a trial period. Since he didn't want to be involved, I handled the sale and the moving preparations.
A trial period? The house is already sold. What are you talking about? Doing this behind my back is like a betrayal. Complaining after marrying into the family? You're the wife, show some understanding and patience. This is my house.
Tom snapped, his logic baffling me as he raised his voice. I was stunned. I realized that in his eyes, my thoughts and opinions seemed irrelevant. Ignoring me, he began to show his parents upstairs. Our house has 3 private rooms: Tom's study, my room, and our shared bedroom. We had planned to give my room to our future child. Wondering where he was guiding them, my husband then bluntly said to me, "Get your stuff out of the room." I wasn't surprised, but I was visibly upset.
"My mom will use your room. Dad gets the bedroom. Why don't you sleep in the yard? You don't want to deal with them, right?"
It was clear that if each of the in-laws were to use a room, there wouldn't be enough rooms available. The smirk on his face as he suggested I sleep in the yard made it clear this was a well-thought-out way to hassle me. I felt suffocated by the rejection from the man I had loved, while my father-in-law smirked at me in the background. Tom was clearly following his parents' instructions. It was conceivable that he was harassing me because he was told to do so. He chose to side with them, not to protect me. This realization brought a renewed sense of despair, and I could only look at him silently. As he opened my room and demanded me to hurry up, I felt like there was no point in arguing. I entered my room, grabbed the heavy suitcase I had prepared in advance, and left at a speed that took Tom by surprise. "I'm going back to my parents' house." "Enjoy yourselves," I told them. I had kept my belongings in order so that I could return to my parents' house at any time. Now, anything left in my room could be disposed of without concern. Tom and his parents seemed startled, not expecting me to leave, and they tried to stop me. My mother-in-law even accused me of pushing housework onto her, but I knew that was her intention all along. Having lived with such a father-in-law and with Tom before our marriage, it seemed to me that she had no love for her family. Instead of fighting back, she had hoped to find a new target in me, the daughter-in-law. Ignoring all their schemes, I headed back to my parents' house. Though surprised, my parents understood the situation and showed anger toward Tom and his parents. Feeling supported, I was relieved until Tom contacted me. He was apparently coming to my parents' house with his parents to take me back, saying, "I'll forgive you, so come back." Anticipating a discussion at my parents' house, I made a call to a certain place. With my parents present, the 6 of us sat around a table. Especially my father, upon hearing what I had gone through, glared at Tom and his parents with utmost anger. Yet, Tom and his parents showed no remorse. Instead, my father-in-law took the lead, accusing me of being an unreasonable daughter-in-law who wouldn't contribute to her husband's family. My father glared at them in disbelief. "Mirabelle, you should behave more sensibly as a wife. You're still working instead of dedicating yourself to your husband and his family. You should be grateful that we even tolerate that. And returning to your parents' house, who do you think you are? The complaints you have are nothing compared to the duties of a wife. Why don't you try harder and be more supportive at home?" My mother-in-law added, echoing my father-in-law's criticisms, with Tom interjecting, exactly what my parents are saying. The conversation in my parents' living room became increasingly chaotic. I tried to convey my feelings while enduring their words, but it only added fuel to the fire. Each time I spoke, their retorts grew more intense. Suddenly, my father spoke up. "I can't believe you're forcing her to live with you. She might be your wife, but she's still my daughter. If you're saying she's not good enough, we're happy to take her back. Let's go for a divorce." Encouraged by my father, I brought out the divorce papers that I had printed from a website before their arrival. My part was already filled out. All that was needed was Tom's signature. Seeing this, both my father-in-law and Tom started to get angry. "Don't be stupid. You think this is a solution? A wife should not think she can just divorce. Taking such extreme measures, you're a coward." My father-in-law yelled, while Tom, looking annoyed at me, followed. "We haven't even had a proper discussion yet. Can't you be a bit more rational?" This is why I hate it when women can't have a logical conversation. They continued with their snide remarks, trying to destroy the family, huh? So arrogant, not caring about the place or situation. They said they wanted to discuss, but it was clear they weren't in a state to have a reasonable conversation. I had already given up on talking and was only focused on getting Tom to sign the divorce papers. But it wasn't just their terrible attitudes that led to this. "I have something to ask your mother," I said, pulling out my smartphone to show a video. My mother-in-law's face, who had been quiet until then, visibly changed upon seeing the screen. It was no surprise she recognized the content. It showed her opening drawers in my room. Since I had started refusing to do chores at their house and limited my interaction, I noticed items gradually disappearing from my room. The drawer contains a large box for antique jewelry, which was the conversation starter between my husband and me. I purchased them for their design, so overall, they are not very expensive, but some are valuable enough to be kept under lock and key. Stolen were not only the visibly expensive pieces of fine jewelry but also several antique rings and accessories. And then, the contents of the locked box. Each item is a treasured part of my collection, and the realization that someone has been breaking into my room sends a chill down my spine. I considered the culprit, but it seemed unlikely that my husband would target the antiques for monetary reasons. The prices vary, and since my husband, with whom I share household finances, has never reprimanded me, I've been freely collecting them. He knows I've been buying mostly inexpensive items. However, the disappearance of the jewelry with gemstones clearly indicates the motive was to cash them in. Could it be that someone was let into the house while I was away? Realizing someone had been entering my room, I bought a small camera and placed it hidden in the room. After setting it up hidden in the shadow of the furniture, it captured the culprit's image within just a few weeks. At a time when no one was supposed to be at home, the person who appeared in my room was my mother-in-law. Someone could enter without my knowledge only if my husband had lent them the key or given them a spare, most likely. My mother-in-law used it to target the times the house was empty, stealing small amounts of precious metals from the jewelry box. When I confronted her with this undeniable evidence, she turned pale and exclaimed, "I've already sold them, I can't give them back." My mother-in-law became frantic and almost in tears, not knowing if the items had been sold to someone else. When I said, "I will claim damages corresponding to the value," she shrieked, "That's a lie. No way." Although my collection was mostly inexpensive, it included some pieces from reputable stores. Among the stolen items were these high-end pieces. Probably, the locked and carefully stored items caught her eye. And their cash value must have been substantial. But this meant the claim amount was in the tens of thousands of dollars. An amount she couldn't afford as a homemaker. My father-in-law, trembling with rage, glared at me. Without reprimanding his wife for the theft, he suddenly snapped, "Don't mess around. You're going to sue over this trivial matter? If you've married into this family, you should listen. Instead of dressing up in toy-like trinkets, why don't you work on yourself more, maybe lose some weight?" My father-in-law, red-faced and yelling. It seemed to genuinely believe that once married into their family, I was their property. He was just angry that I wasn't complying with everything he said. "Enough with the jokes." He finally stood up, raising his hand towards me. I braced myself for the blow, but my father quickly stepped in, preventing it. Just then, the doorbell rang, signaling the arrival of the person. The person whom I had contacted. A lawyer specializing in divorce issues. I had been consulting with this lawyer since I first considered divorce, especially after the theft suspicions arose. He was an older, authoritative lawyer from a firm known for handling divorce cases effectively. His presence filled the room with a serious atmosphere, and Tom and his parents seemed diminished by the lawyer's authority. First, the lawyer explained that we would be seeking compensation from my mother-in-law for the theft. Then, he laid out the evidence of the unreasonable demands and treatment from Tom and his in-laws. Including the diary I kept for such incidents, recordings I had made, and the footage from the small camera, all of which were admissible as evidence. He explained that we could claim damages for the mental anguish they caused. When the topic of divorce and the ensuing financial settlement came up, Tom, in a panic, got up and began pleading with me. "Throw away this stupid idea of divorce, we're in love, aren't we? You don't seriously want to split up?" As he groveled, his parents chimed in, "That's right, rethink this, you can still turn back." It was clear they hoped I'd withdraw the divorce, but I felt it was a waste of time to even engage with them. "We're not in love anymore, so that's inaccurate. I genuinely want to split up. If necessary, I'll consult my lawyer as many times as needed, even if it takes a long time or we end up in court." My firm rejection made Tom slump in defeat. Deflated, perhaps due to the authority of the lawyer's title, Tom's parents also quieted down and grudgingly agreed to the divorce. When the lawyer asked my mother-in-law why she stole, the shocking truth emerged. She was a reckless spender, and after splurging on shopping, she found herself short on living expenses. Unable to tell her husband, she planned to borrow money from Tom. He was on a business trip, so he told her, use the spare key. There's money in the bedroom drawer, take it. She did, but then noticed the rings I left in the bedroom and thought there might be more. Rummaging through my room, she found the jewelry box and the locked box, which she quickly took to a locksmith. I lost the key, she lied to get it opened, took the contents, and replaced the empty box. Every time she was short on cash, she would sneak into our house and steal more. Hearing this, my father-in-law turned on her, calling her the lowest of thieves. Despite their insults, my parents ushered them out of the house, and they left in a loud commotion. I never went back to that house, leaving the disposal of the furniture to them. My ex-husband and his parents began living there. But due to the financial claims I made, they couldn't afford to pay, and the house and land were eventually seized. I heard from neighbors they moved to a small apartment and lived poorly. However, my ex-husband told me that his father had been leaving all the housework to his mother, burdening her and then blaming her for the theft, causing her to run away with most of the family's money. In a panic, my ex-husband called, asking if I knew anything. I had no contact with her, so I advised, you should file a missing person report, and hung up. The two left behind did indeed report to the police. My mother-in-law is being searched for as a missing person, but so far, she hasn't been found. There's been no word from her, but I wonder if she will eventually be returned to my father-in-law and ex-husband. It seems that they are constantly bickering and fighting with each other now that they have no one to take care of them. Even at the company, I hear rumors about my ex-husband Tom, who is in a different department. Due to the significant decrease in his living standard, he's making more mistakes at work and his performance in the sales department has plummeted. Since he used to get work by being nice to everyone, his mistakes and missteps with clients have led to his reassignment to a less desirable department, famous for grueling tasks like telemarketing. He's becoming increasingly exhausted. Moreover, after committing a major mistake by sending confidential company information in an email to a client, he completely lost his footing. This became a big issue in the company, with various departments scrambling to take measures, and Tom was held accountable and penalized. Eventually, feeling uncomfortable, he chose to resign voluntarily, as I was informed by a well-connected colleague. As for my father-in-law, apparently, he too became more irritable at work due to his fatigue. His juniors and subordinates started complaining of mental distress, leading to his demotion for not being suitable for his current position. This hurt his pride, and he chose to resign in anger. Given his reputation, re-employment was difficult, and later on, Tom tearfully contacted me, saying, "We are living off our savings. Can you help us?" But I had no choice but to refuse. The alimony was already paid, and there was no reason to continue any relationship with them. I politely declined and then blocked their numbers. Finally free from them, I decided to change jobs to a company that had been offering me a good position, as I was growing weary of being known as the divorced ex-wife at my current job. Also, not wanting to rely on my parents indefinitely, I used the alimony to move into an apartment closer to my new workplace. My parents, though worried, respected my desire to be independent and saw me off. I make sure to keep in touch with them and spend time with them during long vacations. In my new environment, my life began to improve. I think I have recovered mentally, so much so that I can think positively. I would like to get married again if I have a chance. Where are you now, when our daughter has been rushed to the hospital with serious injuries? Panicking after receiving a call from the hospital while on a business trip, I contacted my husband. Our 5-year-old daughter had happily talked about having a picnic in the park with Daddy over the phone. And now, she had fallen from high playground equipment in the park and was unconscious. Just wait a minute. I'm in the middle of a business meeting at the office. On the other end of the phone, my husband also started to panic for some reason. Our conversation was not making sense, and both of us were confused. In the flow of the conversation, my husband mentioned a certain person's name. As soon as I heard it, the blood drained from my face. Since we both worked, our daughter, Karen, went to daycare. Despite our busy lives with work, housework, and childcare, we enjoyed our life as a family of 3, cooperating with each other. My in-laws were nice people and adored our daughter. Except for one person. Her name was Sophia, 3 years younger than me, living at her parents' house while working a temp job. So, when we visited my husband's parents' house, we often saw her.
Shall we head back? We'll come to visit again. Hey, Karen, say bye to Sophia.
Bye, Sophia. As we were leaving, Karen only glanced at my smiling sister-in-law before quickly hiding behind me.
Sorry, she's a bit shy. It's totally fine. Don't worry about it.
Even if my daughter behaved rudely, Sophia always brushed it off like this. But that was only in front of my husband or parents. Afterwards, she smiled only at my husband, saying, "Come visit again, Hugo." She didn't even glance my way as I apologized. The last Hugo sounded oddly emphasized, or is it just me overthinking? Actually, Sophia and I attended the same university. However, we didn't know each other during our student days, and I don't know much about her from that time. One thing is clear, she doesn't seem to like me much. Even this time, if my husband hadn't been there, she would have said something like, "Can't even greet properly at her age," with a hint of sarcasm. Sophia behaves normally towards me and my daughter in front of my husband or parents. But the treatment we get when we're alone with her is cold. This was evident when my daughter had a fever and was suddenly called from daycare, and I asked my mother-in-law to pick her up.
You asked our parents to pick her up again? It's a nuisance if she passes on her cold or something.
I'm sorry. I had an unavoidable meeting. Yeah, there it is.
Think everything's excused if it's for work? My mom's not young anymore, don't overburden her, okay? I'm not free either.
Indeed, we did rely on my in-laws for our daughter, but we always tried to keep it to a minimum and properly thanked them afterwards. And I've never inconvenienced Sophia, at least.
Oh, sorry. Compared to a full-time working mom with a kid, me and my retired parents must seem pretty free to you, huh?
Sophia sneered, looking at me with a twisted mouth. Nobody said that. Because she always behaved this way only in front of me and my daughter, Karen became wary of Sophia. I suppose she didn't find that amusing. It's natural to have people you don't get along with, and for me and my daughter, that was Sophia. I've tried to keep my distance from Sophia as much as possible, continuing the family relationship without causing trouble. I didn't want to complain to my husband or in-laws about Sophia and risk her bearing a grudge. Considering that, the daily sarcasm seemed trivial. That was until I had to go on a business trip out of state for 5 days due to work. During this period, my husband was supposed to take care of our daughter. My in-laws were away on a trip, so it was tough for my husband, but he was eager, saying he'd go through it. True to his word, he managed the hectic weekdays, and tomorrow was the last day of my trip. I was on the phone with Karen, who had just returned from daycare.
What are you gonna do tomorrow?
Guess what? Daddy and I are gonna have a picnic at the big park. Over the phone, I could hear my daughter excitedly talking about what she was going to do tomorrow. We'll eat lunch and I want to do the obstacle course too.
That sounds fun, honey. Mama will be back tomorrow night. Just make sure you do the obstacle course with Daddy, it can be dangerous.
After hearing my daughter's energetic reply, I ended the call. Karen looked so happy. Hugo must have been doing a great job. I decided to make my husband's favorite dishes when I got back. I thought about playing a lot with my daughter, considering she might have felt lonely. Little did I know, something like that was going to happen. I couldn't have imagined it at the time. It was the afternoon of the next day, as I was about to finish my last task at work. A colleague, with a grave look on their face, passed me a phone call. Rushing to answer, the caller was from the general hospital in our area. Your daughter has been injured and brought in by ambulance. She's unconscious, please come immediately, they told me.
What do you mean? Where's my husband?
Confused and struggling to find words, I learned that there were no guardians at the scene of Karen's accident. A nearby parent and child had called for an ambulance. My contact information was in my daughter's belongings, so the hospital had called me. Where could Hugo have gone? I tried to contact my husband immediately. However, no matter how many times I called, he didn't answer. After explaining the situation to my boss, they told me, "Don't worry about work, go to your daughter right away." Grateful for their understanding, I hurriedly left work for the hospital. On the way back, I kept calling my husband and finally got through.
What's happening? Why are you so frantic?
There's no time for that. Karen is injured and in the hospital. Where are you and what are you doing? His voice was too calm through the phone, which made me raise my voice without realizing. How could this happen while you were supposed to be with her?
Just wait a minute. I'm in the middle of a business meeting at the office.
What? His unexpected reply only added to my confusion. It was a holiday today, and he was supposed to be spending it with our daughter. You're working? What are you talking about? You said you were going to the park with Karen today.
But didn't Sophia contact you?
Hearing that name made me freeze on the spot. Why would Sophia be involved? Barely managing to utter those words, my husband began to realize the gravity of the situation. Regaining a bit of composure, I explained our daughter's condition and heard the full story from him. A little after our call ended yesterday. While preparing dinner, he received a call from his boss. Apparently, a big deal came through, and you're the only one who can handle it, he was told and couldn't refuse. Desperate, he tried contacting his parents, but of course, they couldn't return from their trip immediately. That's when Sophia called, seemingly perfect timing.
I heard from Mom and Dad. You got caught up with work all of a sudden? I'm free tomorrow, so I can take care of Karen.
Seemingly concerned for my troubled husband, my in-laws must have informed Sophia.
A picnic at the park? Then, I'll have to make lunch too.
She said, willingly taking on the responsibility of caring for our daughter. I'll contact Natalia, so don't worry, she said, leading him to believe I was informed. Under those circumstances, to my husband, it must have felt like a relief. But hearing the whole story, I felt a chill run down my spine. Karen! Did she resist? I couldn't help but ask. Being alone with Sophia, who was only kind in front of her father. I'm sure my 5-year-old daughter had her suspicions.
She was crying, wanting to go with Daddy. But, since Sophia was kind enough to come over, I told her not to be selfish. I never imagined something like this would happen.
The conversation with my husband ended awkwardly, and I hung up. Upon arriving at the hospital, I was immediately directed to the ICU. Karen had fallen from high playground equipment and hit her head, still unconscious. When the doctor said there's no danger to her life, but she might have lasting effects, I nearly collapsed from despair. If only I had contacted Hugo one more time this morning. If only I hadn't taken on that business trip. Despite knowing there was nothing I could do about it now, those thoughts kept swirling around in my head. How much time had passed? While I was standing there dazed, my husband arrived at the hospital, and it seemed he had also contacted Sophia. Is Karen okay? Is she safe? Hey, is she all right? Sophia, who appeared before us, was sobbing and worried about our daughter. I just took my eyes off her for a moment to go to the bathroom. I told her I'd be right back. Before we could say anything, she started making excuses. But that's just an excuse, isn't it? It's my fault for not watching her properly. I'm really sorry. After saying what she wanted to, Sophia just cried, leaving no room for us to blame her. Why didn't you come to the hospital sooner? I got a call from Hugo, and you're only getting here now. I struggled to keep my voice steady, trembling with anger. I've been looking for Karen the whole time. The park was too big, and I couldn't find her. Considering she had been searching the vast park, it was odd that her clothes weren't dirty, and even stranger that she didn't notice the commotion when the ambulance arrived. Honestly, my only thought was, how could she? But pointing that out now would only lead to her dodging the issue.
Hugo said he told you to contact me, didn't he? I haven't heard anything? Well, I thought, since you were busy with work, I didn't want to bother you.
Watching Sophia choke up her words and act as if she was afraid of me, my anger only grew.
Hey, calm down, Natalia. She's already feeling sorry, and it wasn't on purpose. Don't be too hard on Sophia.
My husband began to defend his sister, seemingly feeling pity for her. What? It's like I'm the bad guy here. I took a deep breath and simply said, okay. Thinking she had been forgiven, Sophia repeated I'm sorry, covered her face with her hands, and started to sob again. But I didn't miss it. The moment she brought her hands to her face, Sophia glanced at me and quietly smirked. After Sophia left, I confronted my husband.
Do you really believe what Sophia said? Do you truly think she was watching Karen properly?
What do you mean?
I mean, it doesn't make sense. And I saw it, for a moment she...
Calm down. Natalia, you're probably just tired. I know you want to blame someone, but Sophia didn't mean any harm. He was interrupted by the doctor coming out of the treatment room. Hearing your daughter has regained consciousness brought tears of relief to my eyes. Karen could speak, but her memory of the events leading up to and following the injury was hazy.
Karen, do you understand? It's Mom.
Mom. Where am I? My head hurts. This was supposed to be a fun day. Seeing my daughter lying in bed made me feel sorry for her all over again. You went to play with Sophia, but then you got hurt and came here. It's all okay now. Sophia. Is Sophia here? No, she's not here. Karen, what did you do today with her? I forgot. After that, she stopped talking, pulled the blanket over her head, and started to shiver. It was a gesture Karen always made when she was afraid of something. Is she afraid of Sophia? Did she do something to her? Because of her memory issues, my daughter was scheduled to stay in the hospital for a few days for tests. On the way home, I tried telling my husband, Karen seems to be afraid of Sophia, but he dismissed it the same way as before, saying I was overthinking it. If only there was some evidence, it might convince him to keep Karen away from Sophia. Without any belief from him, I needed evidence of Sophia's true nature to show my husband, for our daughter's sake. Later, I reached out to a junior from my college days. She was part of the same circle as Sophia back then and knew her well. She always had to be number one, a troublesome kid. Friends? As if she could have any. With a liar like that, the disdainful voice of my junior, clearly fed up, is something I won't forget anytime soon. From her, I got Sophia's social media account information. Furthermore, I checked the contents of the cell phone my daughter loves to use for kids. Lately, whenever we go out, Karen always carries this phone with her, capturing videos of the scenery and conversations with people she's with. It's become her latest craze. There might be evidence in here of Sophia treating my daughter coldly, that would be a real find. That's what I thought, lightly. Until I saw the videos recorded on it. To put it bluntly, my suspicions were confirmed. But it wasn't just about exposing her true nature anymore. On the third day of my daughter's hospitalization. On a holiday morning, my husband and I visited his parents' house, and we arranged for them to go visit our daughter in the hospital with him. Using the excuse that it would be bothersome to go to the hospital in a large group, I stayed behind. In the living room, Sophia was leisurely sipping coffee. Hello, Natalia. How's Karen since then? She's much better. She might be able to leave the hospital soon. That's good to hear. Sophia, with her eyebrows furrowed in an exaggerated, theatrical voice, feigned relief. What's good about it? Which mouth of yours is saying that? As usual, Sophia plays the part of the good sister-in-law in front of the parents and my husband. I matched her act, putting on my best kind sister-in-law performance. Well, we're off to the hospital then, said my husband as the three of them left the house, and both Sophia and I waved them off with a smile. Once it was just the two of us, as expected, Sophia's attitude changed completely.
What do you want? You didn't stay to make small talk, did you? I faced her squarely, resting her cheek in her hand, clearly annoyed. Could you apologize to Karen? And I want you to take responsibility for what happened this time. Huh? What's that supposed to mean? It's your daughter who's at fault for not following instructions and acting on her own, isn't it? And you think you can keep up that lie forever? I confronted Sophia with copies of her social media posts. They included a post saying, "Woke up early to make this for my boyfriend today," accompanied by a photo of Sophia happily sharing a lunchbox with a man. I also showed her all the posts from that day, detailing shopping and dinner outings. This was the day you were supposed to be looking after Karen. You left her in the park to go on a date with your boyfriend. The story of her searching for my daughter all along was a fabrication, evidenced by these photos. As Sophia looked over each photo, her expression darkened for a moment before she scoffed and tossed the documents aside. What's this supposed to prove? The date on a post can be changed with settings, you know? Indeed, as Sophia said, the evidence might not be conclusive. People often deliberately change the timeline of their posts to prevent their personal information and private life from being fully exposed. This boyfriend of yours, he's an old circle friend, isn't he? I heard from my junior. Wow, you went out of your way to contact someone just to dig up dirt on me. You must be really bored. Sophia laughed mockingly at me, clearly showing no remorse. Such an attitude of belittlement. Whether the post date and the actual photo-taking day match, we can find out by checking with this guy through my junior. So what if I have a boyfriend and went to the park with him? What's wrong with that? So you admit to babysitting while on a date? Who I ask to help babysit is my business, isn't it? With that selfish remark, Sophia turned away. So, in the end, you want to say it's Karen's fault for not following instructions, not yours at all? Confirming that in my mind, I silently nodded. Anyway, no matter what you say, my parents and brother won't believe you. So, you're planning to align your story with your boyfriend and erase the posts to cover it up? I suppose you would do that. No need for such tricks. It's obvious they'll believe me, a family member, over someone else like you. Sophia said this with a face full of conviction, sure of her victory. But her ability to maintain that attitude ended there. I think they'll believe this, I said as I pulled out my cell phone and played one video. What's this? Upon hearing the audio from the video, Sophia's face, previously confident, turned to shock as she stared at the screen. What was shown was the truth of that day, recorded by my daughter. The video captured the surrounding scenery and, clearly, Sophia's voice berating my daughter repeatedly. Stop fussing over flowers and hurry up. You're so slow. Sophia yelled. Then came Karen's trembling voice, I'm sorry. Sophia also filled my daughter's head with insults about me and threatened her if she dared to talk back, shut up. If you talk back again, I'll leave you behind. The footage that followed only showed Karen's feet walking slowly. Likely too scared to even look up at Sophia. After a while, the video showed Sophia rushing off to a man, laying out a leisure sheet and starting to eat without paying any mind to my daughter. When Karen tried to eat some side dishes, Sophia snapped, "Don't touch it, it's dirty." It wasn't made for you, pushing Karen's hand away. Then, as if she had an idea, Sophia smiled at Karen, "Hey, do you want to go back to your mom and dad?" Upon Karen's nod, Sophia suggested, "Let's play a game then. If you can get to the top of that playground equipment alone, I'll take you home." Pointing to the park's largest playground structure. The video ended as Karen headed towards it. When my husband and I reviewed this footage yesterday, I couldn't count how many times I cried. After watching all the videos, Sophia was trembling, but soon she slammed the table forcefully and stood up. What is this? Are you threatening me with a child's video? You're insane. You're trying to pin this on me and Hugo, making it seem like you knew Karen would get hurt. It's just your daughter who was stupid enough to fall for it. In a fit of rage, Sophia snatched the cell phone from me and, unbelievably, smashed it against the wall.
The screen shattered, and the internals were exposed, clearly beyond repair. With a face red with anger and breathing heavily, Sophia smirked.
Now you have no evidence. Serves you right.
Her expression was the epitome of evil. But to me, her attitude felt almost comforting. Yes, keep yelling. Show your true, vile nature even more. I was afraid my heart would be filled with darkness if I let my guard down. So, before that happened, I decided to stop her.
She admitted to leaving Karen in danger knowingly, Hugo.
I said, pulling out a second cell phone from my pocket. Pressing the speaker button, the enraged voices of my in-laws and husband were heard.
Wait. Hugo, Dad, Mom. Why?
I've had the phone on this whole time. They've been listening to everything. And you'll be paying for the phone you broke. It's mine, after all.
But
what Sophia didn't know was that the video she saw was a copy. The original was safely with my husband.
There's no way I'd bring our daughter's important phone here. I suspected you might do something, but I didn't think you'd smash it. It was just a joke. I didn't think Karen would take it seriously. I never imagined she'd actually climb up there.
Sophia, now pale-faced, started making excuses, her voice a mix of apologies and attempts at manipulation.
Karen fell, and I was so scared. I couldn't do anything, and when the ambulance arrived, I just ran away. I'm sorry.
Tears filled her eyes as she meekly apologized, trying to elicit sympathy. Of course, no one was falling for it anymore. Realizing she had no way out, Sophia turned her anger towards me again.
Don't look at me like that. It's all your fault. You, your daughter, my brother, my parents, you took everything from me.
Stop making ridiculous accusations.
Shut up. Just because you're a little good at your job and had a kid, everyone fusses over you. It makes me sick. You and your daughter.
As Sophia started to lash out, I was at a loss for words. Just then, at that very moment, my in-laws, who had been waiting in the car, came into the room. Thanks to my father-in-law scolding Sophia, thankfully, no hands were laid on me. I've been given permission to do as I please with her. I decided to take them up on their offer.
I will be filing a police report,
I declared, and my in-laws agreed without hesitation. Seeing them nod without any reluctance, Sophia began to cry for real and clung to my feet.
Wait. I understand. I'll apologize. I'll apologize to Karen. Please don't report this to the police. Please.
Those pleading eyes, looking up at me, she must have been manipulating people like this since she was a child.
If you had admitted what you did from the start, I would have given you a chance to apologize.
I thought to myself, looking at her as if she were trash.
But now, I've lost that feeling.
I will never forgive someone like you. You will face the full extent of the law. I believe this was the only time I ever treated someone with such cold disdain. I simply looked down silently at my sister-in-law, kneeling and slumped over. My memory of what happened next is vague, and I don't quite remember how we left my husband's family home. Next thing I knew, I was with my husband in our daughter's hospital room.
Mom, what happened? Are you okay?
Karen's voice finally brought me some peace. We filed the police report that very day. As a result, Sophia was subjected to legal punishment. I had thought our chances were slim since Sophia hadn't directly harmed her, but the police said the videos my daughter took and the call records I had let my husband listen to were decisive. Thanks to that evidence, they could prove Sophia had maliciously put my daughter in danger, thinking it was okay if she got hurt. Though she wouldn't be behind bars for more than a year, for someone with her princess attitude, it must have been quite a shock. My in-laws decided to disown Sophia, sold their house, and moved away, ensuring she wouldn't have a family to return to after serving her sentence. Karen, fortunately, didn't suffer any notable aftereffects and was discharged from the hospital without issue.
Grandpa, Grandma, I want this pink one.
Next spring, Karen will start elementary school. Choosing a backpack with her grandparents, she's as lively as